The gunshot echoed through the forest before Lysandra even saw the man's face. Pain tore through her side, white-hot and immediate. She hit the ground hard, tasted dirt and blood. Above her, Corvin's voice, usually so controlled, so measured, cracked into something raw and terrified. "No, no, stay with me. Lysandra, look at me." His hands pressed against the wound, already soaked crimson. In that moment, bleeding out on a frontier road miles from anywhere, she finally understood. This marriage had stopped being about money the moment one of them was willing to die for it. But how had they gotten here? Let me take you back to where it all began. And if you're watching from New York, London, Manila, or anywhere in between, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. This is going to be a long ride, and I want to know who's with me until the end. The rain came down like judgment. Lysandra stood in the vestibule of St. Catherine's Cathedral, watching water cascade off the eaves in sheets, and tried to remember the last time she'd made a choice that was actually hers. Her wedding dress, cream silk, high collar, too many buttons, felt like a shroud. Behind her, the rustle of impatient guests. Ahead, through the half-open doors, an altar she'd never wanted, and a man she'd met exactly twice. "You ready?" Her uncle's voice. Theodore Vale, her father's younger brother, who'd inherited nothing but debts and resentment. He offered his arm with all the warmth of a creditor collecting payment. "Does it matter?" "Not particularly." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "But for what it's worth, Lysandra, this was the only way. Your father's business, my father's business was built by my mother," Lysandra said quietly. "Her ships, her trade routes, her negotiations with the Vorscon merchants when everyone said it was impossible. And when she died, he told me I'd inherit it, that I'd learned enough, seen enough, to run it myself." Theodore's jaw tightened. "You're 23 years old. My mother was 21 when she brokered the Azure contract, 25 when she opened the Eastern markets. But please, uncle, tell me again how age is the problem here." "The problem," Theodore said through his teeth, "is that your father died owing half the merchant houses in the capital, and the only thing standing between us and complete ruin is the fact that Duke Hale needs capital more than he needs pride. So you're going to walk down that aisle, say your vows, and secure this family's future, because that's what women in our position do." Our position. As if he hadn't spent the last 6 weeks liquidating her mother's carefully built network, selling off trade routes like they were cattle at market, all to pay debts her father had accumulated trying to play politics he didn't understand. The organ music started. Too loud, too bright, bouncing off stone walls that had witnessed 500 years of marriages that had nothing to do with love. Lysandra took her uncle's arm because the alternative was standing here forever. The cathedral was half empty. That should have told her something. Duke Corvin Hale, one of the oldest titles in the Northern Territories, land holdings that stretched across 3 provinces, a family name that appeared in history books, couldn't fill a church for his own wedding. She saw him as she reached the halfway point down the aisle. Tall, rigidly straight, dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from the same stone as the building. He didn't smile. Didn't even really look at her, just tracked her approach with the attention of someone inventorying livestock. The priest was old, half-blind, and clearly wanted this over with as quickly as possible. "Dearly beloved," Lysandra let the words wash over her. Beside her, Corvin stood perfectly still. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped each other behind his back, a man holding himself together by force of will. "Do you, Corvin Aldrich Hale, take this woman?" "I do." Flat, inflectionless. "And do you, Lysandra Marie Vale?" She almost said no. The word was right there, balanced on her tongue. What would they do? Drag her to the altar? Force the vows from her mouth? But she thought of her mother's ships, 12 vessels, each one named for a different star, being sold off one by one to cover her father's gambling debts and failed investments. She thought of the trade agreements, years of careful negotiation, being dissolved because Theodore didn't understand the difference between a contract and a handshake. "I do," she heard herself say. The priest smiled. "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you—" "Get on with it," Corvin said. The priest blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The rings. The pronouncement. Whatever needs to be done to make this legally binding." Corvin's voice was like frost forming on glass. "Quickly, please." Lysandra felt something cold settle in her chest. This was her life now. This man, this voice, this utter absence of anything resembling human warmth. The rings were exchanged. His hands were steady. Hers shook so badly she nearly dropped the band. "You may kiss the bride." Corvin turned to her, and for the first time their eyes met properly. His were gray. Not blue-gray or green-gray, just gray. Like winter sky before a storm. He leaned in. The kiss lasted perhaps 2 seconds. His lips barely touched hers, and then he was pulling back, turning to face the scattered guests. "It's done," he said to no one in particular. The wedding breakfast was held at the Hale family's townhouse in the capital, a narrow 4-story building that might have been grand once but now felt neglected. Faded wallpaper, carpets worn thin in the centers, servants who moved through rooms like ghosts, avoiding eye contact. Lysandra sat at the head table beside her new husband and watched him not eat. He'd put food on his plate, cold chicken, bread, some kind of potato dish, but mostly he just moved it around, his attention fixed on a point somewhere beyond the far wall. "You should eat something," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "I'll eat when this is finished." This being? The performance. Now he did turn, just slightly. "You know what this is, what we both are. Let's not pretend there's anything here worth celebrating." Across the table, Theodore was deep in conversation with Corvin's steward, a thin man with ink-stained fingers named Garrett, who'd spent the entire meal looking vaguely nauseated, discussing the terms of the arrangement, probably. How much of the Vale fortune would flow into Hale coffers, and how quickly. "I met your sister," Lysandra tried again. "Charlotte, right? She seems—" "Charlotte is 16 and not your concern." Corvin set down his fork with precision. "In fact, very little of my family's business is your concern. The marriage contract was clear. You'll have your own quarters in the estate, an allowance, freedom to pursue whatever interests occupy your time. What I require is your silence and your absence from matters that don't concern you." "And what matters do concern me?" "None that I can think of." Something hot and angry flared in Lysandra's chest. "You needed my father's money badly enough to marry me. The least you could do is pretend I'm a person and not a bank draft." For a moment, just a flash, something moved behind those gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or irritation that she'd spoken at all. Then it was gone, smoothed back into that impenetrable calm. "Mrs. Hale," he said, and the formality was somehow worse than the coldness. "You fulfilled your primary function by signing the marriage contract. Everything else is optional, including this conversation." He stood, walked away. Left her sitting at her own wedding breakfast like a piece of furniture someone had forgotten to remove. Charlotte Hale appeared at her elbow. 16, Corvin had said, but she moved with the careful precision of someone much older. Dark hair like her brother's, but her eyes were hazel and sharp with intelligence. "He's always like this," Charlotte said, sliding into Corvin's abandoned seat. "In case you were wondering, it's not personal." "It feels pretty personal." "I know." Charlotte stole a roll from Corvin's plate. "But he's been holding this family together with string and spite for 3 years. Ever since Father died and we discovered the estate was mortgaged 6 ways from Sunday. Corvin doesn't know how to ask for help, and he certainly doesn't know how to be grateful for it. So he's mean instead." Lysandra studied the girl. "You're very frank." "I don't have time to be anything else." Charlotte bit into the roll, made a face. "God, this bread is awful. Anyway, I wanted to introduce myself properly before we all trundle off to the frozen north. I'm Charlotte. I'm smarter than my brother, but no one will admit it, and I think you and I might actually be friends, if you survive the first month." "That's reassuring." "Isn't it?" Charlotte grinned. "The estate is called Wintermere, because of course it is. Very dramatic, very cold, very much falling apart. Corvin runs it like a military campaign, which means he's made approximately 7,000 enemies in the surrounding territories because he doesn't understand that sometimes you have to lose a little to gain a lot. He thinks compromise is weakness." "And you?" "I think compromise is strategy." Charlotte leaned back. "I also think you're not nearly as useless as Corvin assumes. Theodore let slip that your mother ran the Vale merchant fleet, that she was the one who actually knew what she was doing. She did. Then you probably learned more about trade and negotiation by the time you were 12 than Corvin has learned in his entire life of managing our failing estate. Charlotte's smile sharpened. Which means this arrangement might not be as one-sided as my brother believes. Something to think about. Before Lysandra could respond, a servant appeared, young, nervous, wringing his hands. "Miss Charlotte, the Duke requests your presence in the study." Charlotte rolled her eyes. "Of course he does." She stood, squeezed Lysandra's shoulder. "Welcome to the family, sister. Try not to freeze to death." Lysandra sat alone at the head table as the wedding guests trickled away. Theodore didn't say goodbye. Didn't even look at her as he left. Too busy counting the money he'd extracted from the marriage contract. By sunset, she was in a carriage headed north. Corvin sat across from her, still not speaking. Outside, the city gave way to farmland, then forest, then rolling hills that grew progressively steeper and colder. The temperature dropped. Lysandra pulled her cloak tighter. "How long is the journey?" she asked. 3 days. Corvin didn't look up from the document he was reading. "We'll stop at inns along the way." "Separate rooms?" Now he did look up. "Obviously." "Just checking." "The marriage will be consummated when necessary," he said, like he was discussing crop rotation schedules. "For the purposes of producing an heir. Until then, your quarters and mine are separate." "How romantic." His jaw tightened. "Romance was never part of this arrangement, Mrs. Hale. If you were expecting poetry and moonlight, you married the wrong man." "I didn't marry you," Lysandra said quietly. "I was sold to you. There's a difference." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he returned to his documents, dismissing her again. The first night, they stopped at an inn called the Silver Stag. Clean enough, but basic. Corvin arranged separate rooms without comment, then disappeared into his with a stack of paperwork. Lysandra lay awake in hers, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, and tried not to think about how completely her life had been dismantled in the space of 6 weeks. The second day passed in silence. The third was worse, a grinding journey up mountain roads that grew narrower and more treacherous with every mile. Snow appeared on the peaks, then on the roads, then everywhere. They arrived at Wintermere just as the sun was setting, and Lysandra understood immediately why Charlotte had called it dramatic. The estate sprawled across a valley carved between 2 mountain ranges, a massive main house built from dark stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The grounds were enormous. She counted at least 3 separate courtyards, stables large enough for 50 horses, what looked like an entire village of outbuildings. All of it slowly falling apart, roof tiles missing, walls cracked and patched, gardens overgrown. The fountain in the main courtyard was dry, clogged with dead leaves. "Welcome home," Corvin said without inflection. Inside was worse. The entry hall was cavernous, 3 stories high, lined with portraits of stern-faced Hale ancestors who all shared Corvin's gift for looking perpetually disappointed. The furniture was old, the carpets faded, and everything smelled faintly of damp and neglect. A housekeeper appeared, Mrs. Davins, gray-haired and efficient. "Your Grace, Mrs. Hale, your quarters are prepared." "Thank you, Mrs. Davins," Corvin handed off his coat. "I'll be in my study, Mrs. Hale should be shown to her rooms and left undisturbed." "Of course, Your Grace." He walked away without another word. Lysandra watched him disappear into the shadows of the estate and felt the weight of her new life settle like chains. Mrs. Davins led her up 2 flights of stairs, down a corridor that seemed to stretch forever, and into a suite of rooms in the eastern wing. "These were the late Duchess's chambers," Mrs. Davins said, lighting lamps. His Grace felt they were appropriate. Appropriate. Not welcoming, not chosen for her comfort, just appropriate. The rooms were beautiful in the way abandoned things sometimes are. High ceilings, tall windows overlooking the valley. Furniture draped in sheets that Mrs. Davins pulled away to reveal pieces that might have been elegant once, but now just looked sad. "If you need anything, there's a bell pull by the bed." Mrs. Davins hesitated. "Dinner is at 8. His Grace typically dines alone in his study, but you're welcome to have a tray here, or use the main dining room if you prefer." "Does anyone ever use the main dining room?" "Not in 3 years, ma'am." "Of course not." Lysandra waited until Mrs. Davins left, then walked to the window. Below, the estate grounds stretched out in the twilight, vast and empty, and slowly being reclaimed by the wilderness. This was her life now. A marriage to a man who treated her like an inconvenience. An estate crumbling under the weight of debts and mismanagement. A future mapped out in loneliness and silence. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and made herself a promise. She would not disappear. Whatever Corvin Hale thought he'd bought with his marriage contract, it wasn't her silence. It wasn't her surrender. Her mother had built an empire from nothing, armed with only intelligence and will. Lysandra had watched her do it, learned from her, absorbed every lesson. If Corvin wanted her to be quiet and ornamental, he was going to be disappointed. The next morning, Lysandra woke to silence. Not peaceful silence, the kind that presses down, that makes every small sound feel like an intrusion. She dressed in one of the practical day dresses she'd brought, ignored the elaborate gowns her uncle had insisted on packing, and went exploring. The estate was a maze. Hallways that dead-ended, staircases that led to locked doors, entire wings that seemed to be closed off, furniture ghosted under sheets. She found the library by accident, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books, most of them gathering dust. She ran her fingers along the spines. Military history, agricultural management, the Hale family chronicles, volume after leather-bound volume documenting 300 years of noble self-importance. Nothing about trade, nothing about commerce or negotiation or the actual mechanics of making money. No wonder the estate was failing. "You're up early," Lysandra turned. Charlotte stood in the doorway, dressed for riding, her hair pulled back in a practical braid. "Couldn't sleep," Lysandra admitted. "The rooms are depressing, right?" Charlotte wandered in, pulled a book at random, made a face. "The strategic importance of cavalry in modern warfare. Riveting. Anyway, I'm heading into the village. Want to come?" "The village?" "Millbrook, about 2 miles north. It's where all the people who actually keep this place running live. Farmers, blacksmiths, the people Corvin pretends to care about while making decisions that make their lives harder." Charlotte's smile was sharp. "Come on, I'll show you the real Wintermere." They rode out on horses from the estate stables. Decent animals, at least. That was something. The morning was cold and clear, the sky that particular shade of blue that only happens in mountain valleys. Charlotte rode like she'd been born in a saddle, comfortable and easy. Lysandra kept pace, grateful that her mother had insisted she learn to ride properly. "So," Charlotte said as they followed a winding road through frost-touched fields, "how bad was the wedding night?" "There wasn't one." "Smart man. You'd probably have stabbed him." "I considered it." Charlotte laughed, bright and genuine. "I like you, Lysandra. I wasn't sure I would, but I do. Most women Corvin could have married would have been simpering idiots who'd cry themselves to sleep every night. You look like you're planning something." "Is it that obvious?" "Only to people who are also always planning something." Charlotte grinned. "What's the first move?" "I don't know yet," Lysandra admitted, "but I need to understand what's actually happening here. The estate, the finances, why everything's falling apart." "Oh, that's easy. Corvin's an idiot." "Charlotte, I'm serious. He's brilliant at strategy, terrible at people. Our father left us drowning in debt because he spent 40 years trying to maintain a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Through enormous parties, maintained connections with noble families who never actually helped when things got bad, donated to charities to keep up appearances while our own tenants were starving." Charlotte's voice hardened. When Corvin inherited, he went the opposite direction. Cut everything. Stopped all the social spending, stopped maintaining relationships. Focused entirely on trying to squeeze profit from the land. Which would be fine, except he did it without explaining anything to anyone. So now half the territory thinks he's a tyrant, the other half thinks he's incompetent, and no one trusts him enough to actually work with him. "And the money from my father's estate? Will buy us maybe 2 years if Corvin uses it wisely." Which he won't, because wisdom requires listening to other people, and Corvin only listens to Garrett. "The steward?" "Garrett Voss. He's been with the family forever. Loyal as a dog and about as imaginative. He manages the books, pays the debts, and tells Corvin whatever Corvin wants to hear." Charlotte guided her horse around a fallen branch. Meanwhile, the actual problems keep getting worse. They crested a hill, and Millbrook came into view, a collection of stone buildings clustered around a central square. Larger than Lysandra expected. maybe 300 people. As they rode in, she saw the truth Charlotte had hinted at. This wasn't a prosperous village. The buildings were maintained, but barely. The people looked careful, wary. Charlotte dismounted in the square, and immediately a handful of children swarmed her. She had candy in her pockets, prepared for this, and distributed it with easy affection. "Miss Charlotte, did you bring your sister?" "I did." Charlotte pulled Lysandra forward. "Everyone, this is Lysandra. She's married to my idiot brother, which means she's family now." A woman emerged from the general store, middle-aged, shrewd eyes. "Mrs. Hale, welcome to Millbrook." "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. I run the store, among other things." She studied Lysandra with the frank assessment of someone used to evaluating people quickly. "You planning to be decorative or useful?" Charlotte choked on a laugh. "Useful if possible," Lysandra said evenly. "Good. We've got enough decoration up at the big house." Mrs. Brennan jerked her head toward the store. "Come inside. I'll show you what useful looks like around here." The store was small but well organized. Shelves stocked with basics: flour, salt, preserved goods. A counter with scales for weighing purchases. Account books lying open, covered in neat columns of numbers. "Most people here work the estate lands," Mrs. Brennan explained. "Tenant farming, mostly. They pay rent to the Duke, keep what's left. Except the Duke keeps raising the rents." "Why?" "Because Lord Garrett says he has to cover the debts. But all it does is make people desperate. Last harvest, 3 families couldn't pay. Duke evicted them." Lysandra felt something cold settle in her stomach. Where did they go? Where does anyone go? Away. South, probably. Looking for work in the cities. Mrs. Brennan's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm not saying His Grace is cruel. I'm saying he doesn't understand that you can't squeeze water from a stone. These families have been here for generations. They know the land, they're loyal, but loyalty doesn't pay rent." "What would pay rent?" "Better yields. Access to better markets. Investment in actual improvements instead of just collecting payments and making demands." Mrs. Brennan closed the account book. "But that would require the Duke to actually talk to his tenants, and he hasn't set foot in this village in 2 years. Charlotte was quiet on the ride back. "I know what you're thinking," she finally said. "What am I thinking?" "That Corvin is worse than you imagined. That this place is a disaster, and you've been sold into a marriage with a man who's destroying everything he touches." Lysandra didn't answer immediately. She watched the road, the fields, the distant mountains. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that your brother doesn't actually want to fail. He's just convinced that strength means never bending, never compromising, never showing weakness. And that's going to destroy him. Can it be fixed? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." That night, Lysandra did something she probably shouldn't have. She waited until after midnight, then slipped through the quiet halls of the estate to Corvin's study. The door was locked. Of course it was. But the library shared a wall with the study, and the Hale family, for all their pride, had never been particularly concerned with security between rooms in their own house. It took Lysandra 20 minutes to find the connecting door, hidden behind a bookcase that swung out on well-oiled hinges. The study was exactly what she expected. Stark, organized, a massive desk covered in neat stacks of papers, each pile precisely aligned. Account books, land surveys, correspondence. She started reading. An hour later, she understood why Corvin was the way he was. The debts were staggering, not just to banks, to other noble families, to merchants, to the crown itself. Her father's money had covered maybe a third of what was owed. The rest was a crushing weight that grew larger every month as interest compounded. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the letters. Responses to Corvin's attempts to renegotiate, to find better terms, to simply ask for understanding. The Duke of Wintermere lacks his father's charm and grace. Perhaps if he spent less time in isolation and more time maintaining proper society connections. We regret to inform the Duke that without collateral beyond what has already been pledged, His Grace would do well to remember that nobility is not merely a title but a responsibility to one's peers. Every single one a rejection. Every single one a reminder that Corvin was alone, unsupported, watched and judged and found wanting by the very people who should have been his allies. No wonder he was bitter. Lysandra was so absorbed in the letters that she didn't hear the door open. "What the hell are you doing in here?" She spun. Corvin stood in the doorway, fully dressed despite the late hour, holding a lamp that cast sharp shadows across his face. "Reading," Lysandra said, because there was no point in lying. "These are private documents. About a situation that now directly affects my life. Say that makes them my business." He crossed the room in 3 strides, slammed the letter down on the desk. "You have no right. I have every right." Lysandra stood, met his eyes. "You married me for my father's money. That money came from ships and trade routes my mother built." Ships and routes. "I understand better than you understand anything in this entire estate. So if you're going to use what my family created to dig yourself out of the hole your father left you in, then yes, I have a right to know exactly how deep that hole actually is. Get out." The Eastern Markets contract, the one you're trying to renegotiate with the Vorskan merchant houses. You're offering them lower tariffs in exchange for exclusive shipping rights. That's none of your concern. It's a terrible deal. The Vorskans will take the tariff reduction, ship 1 season to fulfill the contract minimum, then claim market conditions changed and back out. You'll lose the tariff revenue and get nothing in return. Corvin's jaw tightened. "And you know this how?" "Because my mother negotiated with the Vorskans for 15 years. They're brilliant traders, but they don't honor contracts based on goodwill. They honor them based on mutual advantage. What you're offering them isn't mutual, it's desperate, and they can smell desperation like blood in the water." "Then what would you suggest?" The question came out like a challenge, like he expected her to have nothing. "Offer them guaranteed cargo volumes instead of tariff reductions. They don't actually care about the taxes. They care about filling their ships. Promise them first right of refusal on all estate exports for 3 seasons, minimum tonnage guarantees with penalties if you fail to deliver. That gives them predictability, which is what they actually want, and it costs you nothing except a commitment to actually produce." Silence. Corvin stared at her like she'd suddenly started speaking a different language. "That's..." He stopped. Started again. "That's actually not a terrible idea. I know. But it still doesn't give you the right to break into my study in the middle of the night. Technically, I came in through the library." Lysandra gestured to the hidden door. "Your security is terrible, by the way." Almost. She saw his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. "Get out," he said again, but this time there was less heat in it. Lysandra walked to the hidden door, then paused. "The tenants you evicted last season, Mrs. Brennan told me about them." His expression shuddered. "What about them?" "They were good farmers. Productive. But the harvest failed because the irrigation system broke and no one had the capital to fix it. So instead of fixing the system, you evicted the farmers and blamed them for the failure." "I don't need farming advice from someone who actually talks to the people keeping this estate alive." "Yes, you do." She held his gaze. "You can hate me all you want, Corvin. You can regret this marriage and wish you'd found some other way out of your debts. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to sit quietly in my decorative rooms while you drive this entire territory into the ground because you're too proud to admit you need help." She left before he could respond. Back in her own rooms, Lysandra's hands were shaking. Adrenaline, probably. Or anger. Or the terrifying realization that she'd just declared war on her own husband. But she meant every word. The estate was failing. The people were suffering, and Corvin, for all his rigid control and strategic brilliance, was making it worse because he couldn't see past his own pain and pride. Someone had to do something. Might as well be her. The confrontation in the study changed something, though Lysandra couldn't quite name what. Corvin didn't suddenly become warm or welcoming. He still ate alone, still disappeared into his work for days at a time, still walked past her in hallways like she was furniture. But now, occasionally, she'd find documents left on the library table. Trade agreements, crop yield reports. Always unmarked, always without explanation, but placed where she'd find them. A test, maybe. Or an invitation he was too proud to voice. She read everything, made notes, started building her own understanding of exactly how bad things were. 3 weeks after the wedding, a writer came from the south. Lysandra was in the library when she heard the commotion. Horses in the courtyard, raised voices. She went to the window and saw Garrett Voss practically running toward the main house, his face the color of old parchment. Something was very wrong. She found them in Corvin's study, the door half open, Garrett's voice carrying into the hall. Can't be certain yet, but the reports say she never reached port. Storm off the Sorrow Coast 3 days ago. Winds like nothing the captains had seen in years. Lysandra's blood went cold. She knew that phrasing, the careful way Garrett was choosing his words. A ship had gone down. Which vessel? Corvin's voice was deadly calm. The North Star, Your Grace? Your largest cargo ship, carrying the season's entire textile shipment to the eastern markets. 200 bolts of wool, 100 of linen, all the processed fleece from the northern herds. How much? In total value? Nearly 40,000 crowns. Silence, the kind that precedes an explosion. And the insurance? The policy lapsed last month. You decided not to renew, to save cost. Get out! Your Grace, get out! Garrett fled. Lysandra pressed herself against the wall as he rushed past, his face stricken. Inside the study, something crashed, glass breaking. Then another crash, and another. She should have left, should have gone back to her rooms, pretended she'd heard nothing. Instead, she walked through the door. Corvin stood amid broken glass. A decanter, from the looks of it, and 2 crystal tumblers. His hands were bleeding from where he'd swept them across the desk, sending everything to the floor. I told Garrett to leave, he said without turning. I'm not Garrett. Then you're even less welcome. He gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. Go away, Lysandra. 40,000 crowns, that's more than half of what my father's estate brought in. I'm aware. And without insurance, I'm aware. He spun on her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his control was completely gone. Eyes wild, face flushed, breathing hard. Do you think I don't know what this means? Do you think I need you to explain to me that I've just destroyed any chance of recovering from this disaster? Actually, Lysandra said carefully, I think you need exactly that. Because you're spiraling, and when you spiral, you make bad decisions. Bad decisions, he laughed, bitter and sharp. Like marrying you? Like not renewing the insurance policy to save 800 crowns while risking 40,000. Like putting your entire season's output on a single ship instead of spreading the risk across multiple vessels. Like, stop. His voice cracked. Just stop. I don't need a lecture from someone who's been here 3 weeks and thinks she understands. I understand that the North Star was a 40-year-old vessel with a rigging system that should have been replaced 5 years ago. I understand that the Sorrow Coast is notorious for autumn storms, and any competent shipping master would have routed around it or waited for better weather. I understand that you cut costs on maintenance and insurance and crew experience, and now you're paying the price. Then you understand I'm finished. He said it so flatly, so finally, that Lysandra felt something twist in her chest. You're not finished, she said. 40,000 crowns, Lysandra, gone. The Eastern market's contracts required that shipment to arrive by month's end, or we forfeit the agreements. Which means I lose not just the cargo, but next season's contracts as well. Which means no revenue for spring, no way to pay the debts coming due, no... He stopped, swallowed hard. I'm going to lose Wintermere. Everything my family built for 300 years. Gone because I was too stubborn and too stupid to ask for help. Yes, I know, but you're asking now. I'm not asking you for anything. You don't have to. I'm offering. Lysandra stepped over the broken glass. You still have 11 ships in the Vale fleet. Not Hale ships, Vale ships, which means they're technically mine now, under the marriage contract. My uncle sold most of them, but he couldn't touch the ones that were already at sea when my father died. They're still operational, still running routes. Well, what good does that do me? I don't have cargo to ship, and even if I did, you have timber. Hundreds of acres of forest land that you're not harvesting because you don't have the labor or the infrastructure. You have wool from the northern herds, not the processed stuff you lost, but raw fleece that's sitting in storage because you couldn't afford to process it this season. You have grain stores that are going to spoil if you don't move them before winter locks everything down. She moved closer. You have assets, Corvin. You're just so focused on what you've lost that you can't see what you still have. And you can? I can try. If you let me. He stared at her like she was speaking a language he'd forgotten. Why would you help me? Because if you lose Wintermere, I lose everything too. Because I'm tired of watching you destroy yourself when there's another way. Because she stopped, took a breath. Because someone has to. And right now, I'm the only one offering. The silence stretched. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. What would you need? Corvin finally asked. Access to everything? The account books, the trade records, the contracts? And I need to talk to the tenants, the merchants, the people who actually know what's happening on the ground instead of what the reports say. Garrett's been telling you what you want to hear for 3 years. How's that working out? His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he looked down at his bleeding hands, seemed to notice them for the first time. There's a meeting, he said slowly, tomorrow. The Territorial Council. All the local lords, the guild representatives, the shipping masters. They're expecting me to present a recovery plan after the North Star loss. I was going to cancel. Don't cancel. I'll come with you. They'll eat you alive. These men have been eating you alive for years, and you've survived. I think I can manage. Lysandra held out her hand. Let me help you. He looked at her hand like it might be a trap. Then slowly, he took it. His palm was rough, calloused, bleeding from the broken glass. I need to clean these, he said, pulling away. You need to let me look at the books tonight. All of them. No secrets, no locked drawers. If I'm going to walk into that council meeting tomorrow, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. We? Unless you'd prefer to face them alone? Something moved across his face. Surprise, maybe, or the faintest hint of relief. The books are in the vault. 3rd floor, west wing. Garrett has a key. Where's the other key? I have it. He pulled a chain from inside his shirt, removed a small brass key, handed it to her. Don't lose it. I won't. She turned to go, then paused. Corvin? The men on the North Star. The crew. Did anyone? All hands lost. His voice was hollow. 15 men, most of them from Millbrook. Garrett's sending letters to the families tomorrow. Lysandra closed her eyes. I'm sorry. So am I. The vault was exactly what she expected. A windowless room lined with locked cabinets, each one crammed with decades of records. She pulled them out one by one, spread them across the massive table in the center of the room, and started reading. Charlotte found her there at midnight. You're going to ruin your eyes, Charlotte said, setting down a tray with tea and bread. Your brother's going to ruin everything if someone doesn't figure out what's actually happening here. That bad? Worse. Lysandra rubbed her temples. Your grandfather, your father's father, he was brilliant. Built trade relationships all over the continent, invested wisely, turned Wintermere into one of the most profitable estates in the Northern Territories. But your father, she gestured at the books. He spent like profit was guaranteed, maintained appearances, threw money at social connections, assumed the wealth would last forever. By the time he died, the estate was mortgaged against future earnings that were never going to materialize. And Corvin inherited a disaster that's been compounding for 3 years. Every decision he's made has been aimed at short-term survival, cut costs, raise revenues, squeeze every possible crown out of the estate. Which might have worked if he'd had time to rebuild slowly. But he doesn't have time because the debts keep coming due, and every month he falls further behind. Charlotte sat down, poured tea. Can it be saved? I don't know yet, maybe. The North Star loss is catastrophic, but it's not necessarily fatal. The problem is that Corvin spent 3 years burning every bridge, alienating every potential ally, and convincing everyone that he's incompetent. Tomorrow's council meeting is going to be ugly. They'll demand he step down, petition the crown to revoke his title, install a steward. Can they do that? If enough of them agree, and if Corvin can't demonstrate a viable recovery plan, yes. Charlotte's face was grim. They've been circling for months. The North Star was the excuse they were waiting for. Lysandra looked at the books spread before her. Numbers that didn't add up. Contracts that shouldn't have been signed. Decisions that made sense individually but collectively created a pattern of failure. But buried in all that mess, there were also opportunities. Resources that hadn't been leveraged. Relationships that could be rebuilt. A path forward, if she could find it. I need to talk to someone who knows the timber trade, she said. At midnight? At dawn, then. Someone who can tell me what the market actually looks like, Not what Garrett's reports say. Charlotte smiled. I know just the person. They rode out before sunrise while Corvin was still sleeping and the estate was quiet. The cold bit through Lysandra's cloak, but she barely felt it. Her mind was racing, pieces clicking into place. The person Charlotte knew was a man named Henrik Thorson, a timber merchant who operated out of a mill 3 miles northeast of Millbrook. They found him already at work, overseeing the cutting of massive logs into planks. Miss Charlotte. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with hands scarred from years of physical labor. Didn't expect to see you out this early. Henrik, this is Lysandra. She's married to my idiot brother. My condolences. But Henrik's smile was genuine. What brings you to my mill, Mrs. Hale? Information, and possibly a business proposal. Henrik raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The Duke has timberland, hundreds of acres, but it's not being harvested. Because His Grace doesn't trust anyone enough to invest in the operation, Henrik said bluntly. No offense. None taken. What would it take to make it viable? Labor, equipment, a guaranteed buyer at the other end, because there's no point harvesting timber if you can't move it to market. Henrik wiped his hands on his apron. I've told the Duke this. Multiple times. He always says he'll consider it, then nothing happens. If the barriers were removed, labor hired, equipment purchased, buyers secured, would you be interested in managing the operation? In exchange for what? A percentage of the profits, not a fee. A partnership. You take the risk with us, you share the rewards. Henrik studied her. The Duke know you're offering this? Not yet, but he will by tonight. And if he says no, then we're all in trouble. But I don't think he'll say no. Not anymore. Lysandra met his eyes. The North Star went down. You've heard? Whole Valley's heard. 15 men dead, including 2 from my crew's families. Then you know how desperate things are. Corvin needs revenue, fast. Timber can provide that if we move quickly. Winter's coming, but we've got maybe 6 weeks before the ground freezes. That's enough time to get a crew together, start harvesting, and have the first shipment to market before year's end. That's optimistic. That's necessary. She leaned forward. I have ships, Vale ships, operational and available. I have contacts in the southern markets who buy timber by the boatload. What I don't have is someone who knows how to harvest it sustainably, how to manage a crew, how to do this without destroying the forest in the process. That's you. That's what you bring to this. Henrik was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, surprised and genuine. You really are married to the Duke, right? This isn't some elaborate prank Charlotte's playing. Unfortunately for both of us, it's real. Then I'm in, on one condition. Name it. Any families who lost men on the North Star get first priority for jobs. And I mean real jobs, real wages, not the pittance the estate usually pays. Lysandra didn't hesitate. Done. They shook on it, and Lysandra felt the first small flicker of hope. The Territorial Council met in a hall in the center of Millbrook, a stone building that had probably been impressive once, but now mostly just looked tired. Lysandra and Corvin arrived exactly on time, which apparently was a mistake, because everyone else was already there and had clearly been talking about them. The conversation stopped the moment they walked in. Lysandra counted 12 men seated around a massive oak table, all of them older than Corvin, all of them looking at him like wolves eyeing wounded prey. At the head of the table sat Lord Pemberton, elderly, whip-thin, with eyes like chips of ice, the most powerful landowner in the Northern Territories after the Hales. Your Grace, Pemberton didn't stand. How kind of you to join us, and you've brought your wife. Duchess Hale, Corvin corrected. She's here to assist with the presentation. How progressive. Pemberton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Gentlemen, shall we begin? The first hour was brutal. One by one, the council members presented reports on their own holdings, profitable ventures, successful harvests, new trade agreements, all of it a thinly veiled contrast to Wintermere's failures. Then Pemberton turned to Corvin. Your Grace, perhaps you'd like to address the rather unfortunate situation with the North Star? Corvin stood. Lysandra saw his hands grip the back of his chair, knuckles white. The loss of the North Star was a significant setback, he said. But significant? interrupted Lord Blackwood, a merchant lord with holdings in the capital. Your Grace, it was catastrophic. 40,000 crowns in cargo, 15 men dead, and complete loss of your Eastern markets contracts. That's not a setback. That's a disaster. I'm aware. Are you? Pemberton leaned forward. Because from where we sit, it appears you've been unaware of quite a lot. The declining yields, the tenant evictions, the cancelled contracts. Your father may have made mistakes, but at least he understood the importance of maintaining relationships, of not burning every bridge between here and the capital. My father left this estate drowning in debt, Corvin said, his voice hard. Everything I've done has been to prevent complete collapse. And yet, here we are, collapsed. Blackwood spread his hands. Your Grace, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about Wintermere's future, or rather, the lack thereof. The room went very quiet. What are you suggesting? Corvin asked. A petition to the Crown. Transfer of authority to a steward who can actually manage the territory properly. You'd retain your title, of course, but the day-to-day operations would be handled by someone with more experience. Someone like you? Someone like all of us. A council-appointed administrator, for the good of the territory. Lysandra stood up. Every eye in the room turned to her. Mrs. Hale, Pemberton said with exaggerated courtesy. Did you have something to add? I did, actually. She walked to the front of the room, opened the portfolio she'd brought. You're right that the North Star loss was catastrophic. You're right that the estate has been declining, but you're wrong about the cause. Enlighten us, Blackwood said dryly. The cause isn't mismanagement, it's lack of capital and lack of support. Duke Hale inherited an estate mortgaged to the breaking point, with debt spread across 24 creditors, all of them demanding payment on their own schedules with no coordination. He spent 3 years trying to pay everyone while simultaneously trying to maintain operations, and it's an impossible task, not because he's incompetent, but because the structure itself is unsustainable. And your solution is? Consolidation. The Duke has 12 major creditors. I propose renegotiating all of those debts into a single structured payment plan with staggered terms. This would reduce the monthly burden and provide breathing room for actual investment. Pemberton snorted. And which creditor would agree to that? We all want our money now. You'll get more money over time with a functional estate than you'll ever recover from a collapsed one. Right now, if Wintermere fails, you'll all be fighting over scraps. A coordinated approach benefits everyone. In theory, but theory doesn't pay debts. No, revenue does. Lysandra pulled out the first document, which is why the Duke is launching a timber operation. We have 600 acres of harvestable forest, a mill owner ready to partner, and contracts with southern buyers waiting for the lumber. First shipment goes to market in 8 weeks. That got their attention. Timber takes years to become profitable, Blackwood said. Sustainable timber does, but the Hale forests haven't been harvested in a generation. There are stands of old-growth timber worth more than your entire year's crop yield, Lord Blackwood. We're not talking about planting saplings and waiting. We're talking about harvesting existing resources that have been sitting idle. On what capital? Timber operations require significant upfront investment. Covered by the remaining Vale estate assets, which, as the Duchess, I'm contributing. Equipment, labor costs, transport, all funded through the marriage settlement. She saw Corvin stiffen beside her, but he didn't contradict her. Additionally, Lysandra continued, the Duke is implementing a new tenant agreement structure, reduced rents in exchange for labor contribution to estate projects. This provides the workforce needed for the timber operation while easing the burden on farmers who've been struggling under the current system. That's absurd, Pemberton said. You'll lose rental income. We're already losing it through evictions and abandoned holdings. This way, we keep families on the land, rebuild loyalty, and create a sustainable labor force. Long-term gain over short-term extraction. And the Eastern markets contracts you've lost? Being renegotiated through the Vorscon merchant houses using guaranteed cargo volume agreements instead of tariff concessions. We're offering predictability over discounts, which is what the Vorscons actually value. Blackwood leaned back, studying her. You've thought this through. I've done nothing but think it through for 3 weeks. And if it fails, then we're no worse off than we are right now. But if it succeeds, Wintermere stabilizes, you all get paid, and the territory recovers. She met each of their eyes in turn. The question is whether you're willing to give it 6 months, or whether you'd rather tear everything apart now and guarantee failure. Silence. Then Pemberton laughed, dry and sharp. Well, you've certainly married someone with more spine than sense, Your Grace, though I'm not sure which of you that applies to. Both of us, apparently, Corvin said quietly. The timber operation? Lord Summersby spoke for the first time. A quieter man, owner of the territory's largest grain mill. You said Henrik Thorson was partnering? Yes. Henrik's good. If he believes in this, that's worth something. Summersby looked at Pemberton. I say we give them the 6 months. The alternative is a legal battle that costs all of us time and money, with no guarantee of a better outcome. Seconded, said another voice, then another. Pemberton's expression was unreadable. You understand that if you fail, if this grand plan falls apart, there won't be another chance? The petition goes forward, and you lose everything. I understand, Corvin said. Then you have your 6 months. Don't waste them. Outside, the cold air hit like a slap. Lysandra's hands were shaking. Adrenaline crash, probably. She'd just made promises she had no idea if she could keep, committed resources that might not exist, and bet everything on a plan she'd assembled in less than 24 hours. That was insane, Corvin said. I know. You just pledged the entire Vale estate to a timber operation I didn't know existed until this morning. I know. And renegotiated tenant agreements without consulting Garrett. Garrett would have said no. Corvin stopped walking, turned to face her. Why did you do that? Because they were going to destroy you, and I'm not ready to be married to a powerless duke in a failed estate. She met his eyes. Also because someone had to, and it wasn't going to be you. You could have done nothing. You were drowning in there, Corvin. I watched you. You had no plan, no response, nothing except pride and stubbornness, which would have gotten you exactly nowhere. So you decided to risk everything on a scheme we have no guarantee will work. Yes. He stared at her. Then, incredibly, he smiled. Not a big smile, not warm, but real. You're either brilliant or completely reckless. Probably both. Garrett's going to have an attack when he finds out. Let him. We need him to implement the tenant agreements, not approve them. Lysandra started walking again. We have work to do. Henrik needs labor hired by week's end. The Vale ships need to be contacted and rerouted. The Vorskan contracts need to be drafted before someone else snaps up their capacity. And we need to figure out how to actually run a timber operation neither of us knows anything about. You really think we can do this? She stopped, looked back at him. I think we don't have a choice, and I think that sometimes the only way out is through. Corvin nodded slowly. All right then, through it is. They rode back to Wintermere in silence, but it was different now. Not the hostile silence of two strangers, but something else. Something that might, eventually, become partnership. The real work started that night. Lysandra sent riders to 3 of the Vale ships still at sea, rerouting them to pick up timber instead of their planned cargo. She drafted contracts with the Vorskan merchants using language her mother had taught her. Specific, binding, with built-in protections against the exact loopholes the Vorskans loved to exploit. Corvin met with Henrik and the mill owners, hammering out the details of the harvesting operation. Wages, safety protocols, the exact stands of timber to be cut first, chosen for maximum value with minimum environmental damage. Charlotte coordinated with the tenants, explaining the new agreement structure, calming fears, answering questions. She was better at this than either Corvin or Lysandra, knew the families, understood their concerns, could speak their language. Garrett watched it all with increasing panic. This is madness, he said, cornering Lysandra in the library 3 days into the operation. You're committing resources we don't have, making promises we can't keep. We're making the promises necessary to survive the next 6 months. And after that, when it all falls apart, it won't fall apart. You can't know that. No, Lysandra agreed, but I know that doing nothing guarantees failure. This at least gives us a chance. The Duke should never have allowed... The Duke, said Corvin from the doorway, is standing right here, Garrett, and he's well aware of what his wife is doing. Garrett's face flushed. Your Grace, I'm simply concerned. Your concern is noted. Now, I need you to draw up the paperwork for the consolidated debt restructuring. Lysandra has the list of creditors and proposed terms. I want it ready for review by tomorrow. Tomorrow? That's impossible. Then work through the night. Corvin's voice was ice. This was your job, Garrett. Managing the finances, finding solutions, preventing disasters like the North Star. You failed. Now either help fix it or get out of the way. Garrett left, practically vibrating with indignation. You didn't have to be that harsh, Lysandra said quietly. Yes, I did. He's been enabling my worst instincts for 3 years, telling me what I wanted to hear instead of what I needed to know. That ends now. He's loyal to you. Loyalty without honesty is just compliance. I don't need compliance. I need people willing to tell me when I'm wrong. Corvin looked at her. Like you did, in the council meeting. You're welcome. I didn't say thank you. I know, but you're thinking it. Almost. He smiled again. The first timber crew started work on a cold morning 10 days after the council meeting. 20 men, most of them from families who'd lost someone on the North Star. Henrik ran the operation with the precision of someone who'd been doing this his entire life, calling out instructions, checking safety lines, ensuring every cut was clean and controlled. Lysandra watched from the edge of the worksite, Corvin beside her. If this works, he said quietly, it will be because of you. If it works, it will be because we all did our parts. Don't deflect. You could have stayed in your rooms, played the decorative duchess, let everything fall apart, and walked away with the moral high ground. Instead, you risked everything to save an estate you have no personal attachment to and a marriage you never wanted. I have personal attachment now, Lysandra said, whether I wanted it or not. The first tree fell with a crack like thunder. The crew moved in immediately, stripping branches, preparing the trunk for transport. The ship captains responded, Lysandra continued. 3 vessels rerouting to pick up timber. First one arrives in 4 weeks, which means we need to have at least partial cargo ready by then. Will we? Ask me in 3 weeks. Corvin was quiet for a moment, then, Lysandra, what you said to the council about contributing the Vale estate assets, how much is actually left? She'd been waiting for this question. Not as much as I implied. Theodore liquidated most of the liquid capital. The ships are the main asset, and they're valuable, but they're also committed to existing contracts through the end of the year. I'm not technically supposed to reroute them. So you lied. I exaggerated, strategically. If those contracts fall through, then we'll have bigger problems than angry shipping partners. But we're not going to fall through. We're going to make this work, fill those ships with timber, pay the debts, and buy ourselves time to actually fix this place properly. You have a lot of confidence for someone betting on something this unstable. I have a lot of stubbornness. There's a difference. A rider appeared on the ridge above them, moving fast, urgent. Corvin saw him at the same time Lysandra did. That's one of the estate couriers. The rider pulled up hard, horse breathing steam in the cold air. Your Grace, message from the capital, urgent. Corvin took the sealed letter, broke it open. Lysandra watched his face go still. What is it? He handed her the letter without speaking. It was from Lord Pemberton, short, brutally direct. Your Grace, I regret to inform you that despite our agreement at the council meeting, several members have chosen to move forward with a formal petition to the Crown. The matter will be heard in 3 months. I suggest you use the time wisely. Pemberton. They're not waiting, Lysandra said. No, their betting will fail, and they want to be positioned to take over when we do. Corvin's jaw was tight. 3 months, that's all we have. Then we'll make it work in 3 months instead of 6. Lysandra, no surrender, no giving up. She turned to face him fully. They want to watch us fail? Let them watch. And when we're still standing at the end of 3 months, we'll make sure every single one of them knows exactly what they underestimated. Corvin looked at her, really looked at her, and Lysandra saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. All right, he said. 3 months. Let's show them what we're made of. 3 months became a countdown that echoed through every decision, every conversation, every exhausted night hunched over account books and shipping manifests. The timber operation ran from dawn until the light failed, Henrik pushing the crews hard but fair, keeping everyone focused on the impossible deadline. First shipment ready in 4 weeks. Second, 2 weeks after that. Third barely scraped together before the first snow locked the forest road solid. Lysandra stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. There was too much to manage, coordinating with ship captains who didn't trust the sudden route changes, negotiating with buyers who'd never heard of her, tracking every crown spent against projected revenues that felt more like prayers than actual plans. Corvin was worse. She'd find him in his study at 3 a.m, still working, subsisting on coffee, and stubborn refusal to acknowledge human limitations. "You're going to collapse," she told him one night, 6 weeks into the operation. "I'll collapse after the petition hearing." "That's not how bodies work." "Then my body will have to adapt." He didn't look up from the contract he was reviewing, something about mineral rights that apparently mattered, but Lysandra couldn't bring herself to care about at this hour. The first timber shipment reaches market in 3 days. If the buyers reject the quality or the pricing falls through, it won't. You can't know that. I can know that we've done everything possible to ensure it. Henrik selected the best timber. The Vale captains are reliable. The southern buyers have been dealing with my family for 20 years. She moved around the desk, took the contract from his hands. What I also know is that you're no use to anyone if you work yourself into the ground before we even get to the hearing. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw how exhausted he actually was, dark circles under his eyes. A hollow quality to his face that hadn't been there 2 months ago. "I can't fail," he said quietly. "Not again. Not after the North Star, not after everything my father destroyed, not after—" He stopped, swallowed. "If I lose Wintermere, I lose everything. The estate, the title, my sister's future, everything. You're not losing anything. We're not losing anything." She sat on the edge of the desk. "But you have to trust that we've done the work. At some point, you have to let go and see what happens." "I don't know how to do that." "I know, but you're going to have to learn." The message came on a morning so cold that frost turned the windows to ice. Lysandra was in the library, drafting yet another letter to the Vorscon merchants, when Charlotte burst in without knocking. "We have a problem." Lysandra looked up. Charlotte's face was flushed from running, her breath coming hard. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Lord Pemberton just showed up at our door with 6 armed men and a court order." Lysandra's blood went cold. "Where's Corvin?" "Meeting them in the main hall. You need to come. Now." They found Corvin standing rigid in the center of the hall, Pemberton opposite him with a document in his hand and an expression of barely concealed triumph. "Your Grace?" Pemberton said as Lysandra entered. "How convenient. Your wife should hear this as well." "Hear what?" Lysandra kept her voice level. "The petition hearing has been moved forward. The Crown has agreed to hear the case in 1 week instead of 3 months. The words hit like a physical blow. 1 week, not 3 months. 1 week. On what grounds? Corvin's voice was ice. On the grounds that several creditors have filed for immediate repayment, claiming imminent risk of default, which, given your recent creative financial arrangements, isn't entirely inaccurate. Pemberton smiled. The court agrees that waiting 3 months poses unnecessary risk to legitimate business interests. So the hearing is scheduled for next week in the capital. I trust you'll be able to attend? You son of a... Corvin, Lysandra's hand on his arm tight enough to hurt. Don't. Pemberton's smile widened. Wise counsel from your Duchess, your Grace. Though I have to say, her little gambit with the timber operation has been quite entertaining to watch. Pity it won't matter now. 1 week isn't nearly enough time to demonstrate sustainable recovery. Get out of my house. As you wish. We'll see you in the capital. Pemberton gestured to his men. Oh, and your Grace? I'd bring substantial documentation to the hearing. The Crown takes financial mismanagement quite seriously, especially when it affects an entire territory. Wouldn't want any unfortunate oversights. He left. The armed men followed. The moment the doors closed, Corvin punched the nearest wall. Stone. His knuckles split open. 1 week, he said. 1 goddamn week. Then we have 1 week to prepare. Lysandra was already thinking, mind racing. The first timber shipment, when does it reach market? 4 days from now. And we'll have sale confirmation how quickly after that? If everything goes perfectly. 5 days, which is 2 days after the hearing. Corvin looked at his bleeding hand like he'd forgotten it was attached to him. We're finished. No, we're not. Lysandra turned to Charlotte. Get Henrik and Garrett and every single person involved in this operation. We need a full accounting of exactly where we stand right now, this minute. Lysandra, move, Charlotte. Charlotte ran. Lysandra turned back to Corvin. We're not giving up. Not yet. Not ever. But we need to know exactly what cards we're holding before we walk into that hearing. They worked through the night. Henrik brought the timber operation records. Every tree cut, every board planed, every crown spent. Garrett brought the estate books, looking like a man attending his own funeral. Charlotte assembled reports from the tenants, the merchants, everyone who'd been touched by the reorganization. By dawn, they had a picture. Not complete, not perfect, but real. The timber operation has cost us 18,000 crowns in labor, equipment, and transport, Garrett said, his voice hollow. If the first shipment sells at projected prices, we'll recover maybe 12,000. That's a 6,000 crown loss. But we have 2 more shipments, Lysandra countered, which won't be sold before the hearing. The court won't accept projected revenue. They'll only consider actual documented income. Then we need to demonstrate operational improvement in other areas. Lysandra pulled out the tenant reports. Occupancy is up. Every holding that was vacant 6 weeks ago is now filled. Evictions have stopped completely. Agricultural output projections for next season show a 15% increase due to the new labor agreements. Projections, Pemberton's voice echoed in her memory. The court wants results, not promises. The Vorscon contracts, Corvin said suddenly. Have they been finalized? Pending final approval. They're waiting for... Lysandra stopped. They're waiting for confirmation of cargo capacity. If we can demonstrate that the timber operation is producing actual shippable goods, they'll sign. Can we get them to sign before the hearing? Not unless we can physically show them the timber, which is currently in transit to southern markets and won't arrive for 4 more days. They stared at each other across the table. So we're presenting a court with an estate that's still losing money, contracts that aren't finalized, and operations that haven't proven viable yet, Garrett summarized. Against creditors demanding immediate payment and a petition claiming we're mismanaging the territory into the ground. Yes, Lysandra said. That's exactly what we're doing. That's suicide. That's all we have. The journey to the capital took 2 days. Lysandra and Corvin traveled alone. Charlotte wanted to come, but someone needed to stay and keep the timber operation running. Henrik promised to send word the moment the first shipment sold. If it sold. They stayed in a small inn on the outskirts of the capital, unable to afford anything grander. Corvin spent the evening before the hearing reviewing documents, making notes, preparing arguments that Lysandra knew wouldn't be enough. She found him on the inn's balcony near midnight, staring at the city lights. You should be sleeping, she said. So should you. Fair point. She leaned against the railing beside him. Corvin, what happens if we lose tomorrow? I told you, I lose everything. I meant specifically, what does the crown actually do? He was quiet for a moment. They revoke my administrative authority, install a steward to manage the estate while they audit the finances. If the audit finds evidence of criminal mismanagement, which Pemberton will make sure it does, they can strip the title entirely. I'd keep the name, but everything else goes to the crown or gets sold to pay creditors. And Charlotte? Becomes a ward of whatever family is willing to take her, probably Pemberton, since he's made it clear he wants control of Wintermere's resources. Corvin's jaw tightened. She deserves better than that. She deserves better than a lot of things. So do you. I don't know about that. I do. Lysandra turned to face him. You inherited an impossible situation, and you've been fighting alone for 3 years. The fact that you're still standing is remarkable. The fact that you agreed to let me help, to let anyone help, shows you're capable of changing. That matters. Does it? Because from where I'm standing, all I've done is drag you into this disaster with me. I chose to be dragged. No one forced me to fight the council, to reorganize the estate, to bet everything on a timber operation we barely understand. I made those choices because I saw something worth saving. What? A failing estate? A husband who treats you like a business partner at best? A man who cares enough to work himself to exhaustion trying to save his family's legacy? A territory full of people who want to survive and thrive if someone would just give them a chance. A challenge that's actually worthy of effort. She reached out, took his hand, the one with split knuckles from punching the wall. I didn't expect to care about any of this, but I do. And I'm not walking away, regardless of what happens tomorrow. He looked down at their joined hands. Why? Because someone has to fight for this place. And I've discovered I'm very good at fighting. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Corvin lifted her hand, pressed it briefly against his forehead, a gesture so unexpected, so vulnerable, that Lysandra felt something shift in her chest. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that." "We're not done yet." "No, but just in case." "We're not done yet," she repeated more firmly. The hearing was held in the Crown Court building, a massive stone structure that radiated authority and judgment. Lysandra and Corvin arrived to find the chamber already packed, Pemberton and his allies on one side, the creditors on the other. And in the center, 3 royal magistrates who would decide Wintermere's fate. The lead magistrate was a woman named Justice Aldermere, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being absolutely impossible to manipulate or charm. "This court is convened to hear the petition regarding the Duchy of Wintermere," she announced. "Lord Pemberton, you may present your case." Pemberton stood, smiled, and proceeded to methodically dismantle everything Corvin had built. He had documents, testimonies, evidence of declining revenues, failed contracts, tenant evictions. He painted a picture of an estate in freefall, managed by a duke too proud to admit his own incompetence. The North Star disaster was merely the latest in a series of catastrophic decisions, Pemberton concluded. Duke Hale has demonstrated time and again that he lacks the judgment necessary to manage a territory of this size and importance. For the good of the people who depend on Wintermere, we request the Crown install proper oversight. Justice Aldermere turned to Corvin. "Your Grace, you may respond." Corvin stood. Lysandra saw his hands clench briefly, then relax. "Everything Lord Pemberton said is factually accurate," he began. "The estate has declined. The North Star was a disaster. I have made mistakes." Lysandra's heart sank. This was surrender. He was giving up. "However," Corvin continued, "what Lord Pemberton's presentation fails to account for is context and recent progress. Yes, the estate has struggled, but every single struggle he mentioned stems from debts my father accumulated before his death, debts I've been attempting to manage while simultaneously maintaining operations. It's been an impossible balance, and I've failed at it more often than I've succeeded." He gestured to Lysandra. "Which is why I stopped trying to do it alone. 6 weeks ago, my wife proposed a comprehensive restructuring plan. New tenant agreements, a timber operation leveraging unused resources, consolidated debt management. And unlike every other plan I've attempted, this one is working." "Working is a strong word, Your Grace," Justice Aldermere said. "I see no evidence of positive returns in these documents." "Because the returns are still in progress, but the infrastructure is real. The timber operation is active. The first major shipment is currently at market. Within days, we'll have confirmation of sale. Days we don't have," Pemberton interrupted. "The court can't make decisions based on promises and projections." "The court can make decisions based on demonstrated operational improvement," Corvin shot back. "Tenant occupancy is up. Evictions have stopped. Agricultural output is projected to increase 15% next season. These are real measurable changes. Projected increases aren't actual revenue. No, but they demonstrate a functioning, improving estate rather than a failing one." The magistrates conferred quietly. Lysandra watched Justice Aldermere's face, trying to read her reaction. Finally, the magistrate spoke. "Your Grace, while we appreciate your efforts at reform, the petition raises valid concerns about immediate financial viability. Without concrete evidence of positive returns, this court cannot dismiss the creditor's claims of default risk." Lysandra stood before she could think better of it. "Your Honor, if I may?" Justice Aldermere raised an eyebrow. "Duchess Hale, how unusual. You may speak. Lord Pemberton claims this petition is about protecting the territory, but if that were true, he would have given us the full 3 months originally agreed upon. Instead, he moved the hearing forward specifically to prevent us from demonstrating results. Lysandra moved to the front of the chamber. The timber operation is viable. The reorganization is working, but neither can prove itself in 1 week. That's not incompetence. That's simply how time works. An interesting argument, Duchess, but it doesn't address the immediate financial concerns. Then let me address them directly. Lysandra pulled out a document she'd prepared the night before. The estate currently owes approximately 60,000 crowns across various creditors. The first timber shipment, if it sells at projected prices, will generate 12,000 in revenue. That's not enough to clear the debts, but it's enough to make the first structured payment under the consolidation plan, which demonstrates both capability and intent to honor obligations. If it sells, Pemberton said, a rather significant if, a reasonable if, based on current market conditions and established buyer relationships. And if it doesn't sell, or sells below projection, then we adjust and continue. This court doesn't require perfection, it requires good faith effort and viable path forward. We're demonstrating both. Justice Aldermere studied her. You're asking this court to gamble on your promises, Duchess. I'm asking this court to give us the time we were originally guaranteed before Lord Pemberton manipulated the schedule. That's a serious accusation. It's an accurate observation. The petition was scheduled for 3 months. Lord Pemberton used creditor pressure to move it to 1 week. If that's not manipulation, I don't know what is. Pemberton's face flushed. Your Honor, the Duchess is clearly pointing out facts I find somewhat troubling, Justice Aldermere interrupted. She looked at her fellow magistrates. I'm inclined to postpone this hearing. Give the Duke and Duchess their full 3 months to demonstrate results. Relief flooded through Lysandra so powerfully she almost swayed. Then the chamber doors burst open. A courier rushed in, mud-splattered and breathing hard. Justice Aldermere, urgent message for Duke Hale. Everyone turned. The courier crossed the chamber, handed Corvin a sealed letter. Corvin broke it open, read, and went absolutely white. What is it? Lysandra asked. He handed her the letter without speaking. It was from Henrik. Short, devastating. Timber shipment rejected by southern buyers. Quality insufficient for agreed pricing. Cargo returned unsold. Operation losses now exceed 20,000 crowns. I'm sorry. Henrik. The chamber erupted. Pemberton's allies calling for immediate ruling. Creditors demanding payment. Magistrates calling for order. Lysandra stood frozen, the letter clutched in her hand, watching everything they'd built collapse in real time. Your Honor, Pemberton's voice cut through the chaos. I believe this settles the matter. The Duke's grand plan has failed, spectacularly. I renew the petition for immediate transfer of authority. Justice Aldermere looked at Corvin. Your Grace, do you have any response? Corvin said nothing, just stood there, defeated. Lysandra's mind raced. 20,000 crowns in losses. No revenue. No proof of concept. Nothing to show the court except failure. They'd lost. No. No, they hadn't. Not yet. Your Honor, Lysandra heard herself say, I request a 48-hour continuance. On what grounds? On the grounds that one failed shipment doesn't invalidate the entire operation. The timber is real. The quality concerns can be addressed. We have 2 more shipments that can be redirected to different buyers. Give us 48 hours to negotiate alternative sales. Duchess, the court cannot. 48 hours. That's all I'm asking. If we can't demonstrate a viable path forward in that time, we'll withdraw our defense of the petition. She looked at Corvin, willing him to back her up, to fight instead of surrender. He met her eyes. Something moved in his expression, shock, maybe, or disbelief that she was still fighting. Then he straightened. I second my wife's request, Your Honor. 48 hours. Justice Aldermere looked between them. The chamber had gone quiet, everyone watching. You understand that if you fail to demonstrate viable recovery in that time, this court will rule immediately in favor of the petition? We understand, Lysandra said. Very well, 48 hours. This hearing is adjourned until then. The gavel came down. Outside, Corvin grabbed Lysandra's arm, pulled her into an alcove away from the crowd. What are you doing? He demanded. We can't fix this in 48 hours. The timber was rejected. We have no buyers, no revenue, no... We have the timber. That's real physical goods. And we have ships that can redirect it anywhere on the continent. She was talking fast, thinking faster. The southern buyers wanted premium quality at luxury prices. Fine. We find buyers who want decent quality at reasonable prices. Industrial uses instead of decorative, construction, shipbuilding, mills. In 48 hours? My mother had contacts all over the continent. I have her correspondence files, her contract records. Somewhere in there are buyers who'll take what we have. She grabbed his shoulders. But I can't do this alone. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? He stared at her. Then, incredibly, he laughed, sharp and slightly manic. We're going to fail. Probably. But we're going to fail fighting, not surrendering. All right then. He pulled her into a brief, hard embrace, the first real physical contact they'd had beyond handshakes. Let's go down swinging. They went back to the inn. Lysandra sent urgent messages to every contact she could remember from her mother's business. Corvin wrote to the ship captains, ordering cargo redirections. They worked through the night again, fueled by desperation and the absolute refusal to quit. By morning, they had 3 potential buyers. None of them premium, none of them offering the prices they'd hoped for, but real offers for real timber. The problem was getting confirmation in time. The fastest response we could possibly get is 36 hours, Corvin said, staring at the map they'd spread across the table. And that's only if the buyers respond immediately, which they won't. Then we need to go to them. What? The closest buyer is Lord Harwick, 2 hours south. He runs a shipyard. If we can get there, present the timber specifications in person, negotiate on the spot. That's insane. That's all we have. They rode out within the hour. 2 hours became 3 because the roads were terrible. They reached Harwick's shipyard as the sun was setting, found him overseeing the construction of a merchant vessel. Lord Harwick was old, scarred, and deeply uninterested in nobility or politics. Duke Hale, he said without preamble, heard you were having troubles. What do you want? Timber. Quality sufficient for shipbuilding, price below market rate. How much below? Corvin quoted a number. Harwick snorted. That's not below market. That's giving it away. That's what we can offer. The timber is already cut, already in transit. You take it now at this price or we find someone else. Let me see the specifications. Lysandra handed them over. Harwick read in silence, occasionally grunting. This quality rating, this is confirmed? Inspected by Henrik Thorson. He's the best in the Northern Territories. Thorson's good. Knew his father. Harwick looked at the specs again. I'll take half the shipment. Payment on delivery. We need payment confirmed now. Written agreement we can show the Crown Court. You're asking me to commit to buying goods I haven't seen from a supplier you can verify at a price that's frankly absurd in your favor, Lysandra interrupted. We're not asking for charity. We're offering you a deal you won't find anywhere else. But we need documentation now. Harwick studied her. Then he smiled, gap-toothed and genuine. You've got spine, Duchess. All right. Half the shipment, written agreement, payment on delivery. But if the quality doesn't match these specs, the price drops further. Agreed. They got the documentation. Rode back to the capital through the night, horses exhausted, both of them running on nothing but will. 48 hours became 47, became 46. The second buyer never responded. The third sent a rejection. But Harwick's agreement was real, verified, legal. When they walked back into the court chamber, Lysandra was so tired she could barely stand. But she handed Justice Aldermere the contract with steady hands. Confirmed sale agreement for half the timber shipment. Buyer verified, price documented, delivery scheduled. Revenue of 6,000 crowns, with potential for additional sales of the remaining timber through ongoing negotiations. Justice Aldermere read the contract, looked at them. This is half of what you originally projected. Yes, Your Honor. And represents a significant loss on your overall operation. Yes, Your Honor. But it also represents actual revenue from actual sales, which demonstrates the operation is viable, if not yet profitable. Pemberton stood. Your Honor, this is a disaster. They've lost 14,000 crowns. They've demonstrated operational capacity, and secured a legitimate buyer, Justice Aldermere corrected, which was the condition for this continuance. She consulted with the other magistrates. The court finds that while the Wintermere estate has experienced significant challenges, the Duke and Duchess have demonstrated sufficient good faith effort and operational improvement to warrant continued oversight under their management. Lysandra's knees nearly buckled. However, Justice Aldermere continued, given the legitimate concerns about financial stability, the court orders quarterly audits for the next 2 years. The Duke will submit detailed financial reports and must demonstrate continued progress. Any evidence of further mismanagement will result in immediate review of this decision. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Corvin said. Then this court rules against the petition. Duke Hale retains full authority over Wintermere. Case dismissed. The gavel came down. They'd won. Barely, at tremendous cost, with quarterly audits hanging over them like a sword. But they'd won. Outside, Corvin leaned against the wall and just breathed. We did it, Lysandra said. You did it. I was ready to give up in there. But you didn't. That's what matters. She touched his arm. We should go home. There's a lot of work to do. There's always a lot of work to do. Yes, but now we have time to do it. They started walking toward the inn, planning to collect their things and head back to Wintermere. They never made it. The attack came from an alley. 3 men, moving fast. One grabbed Corvin. Another went for Lysandra. The third had a knife. His Grace's creditors send their regards, the man with the knife said. Then everything exploded into violence. Corvin fought hard, landing punches, but he was exhausted and outnumbered. Lysandra screamed, tried to run, felt hands grab her, pull her back. The Duke learns his lesson, the knife wielder said, and his pretty wife pays the price. The blade flashed toward her throat. A gunshot cracked the air. The knife wielder fell. More shots. The other attackers scattered, running. Lysandra spun. A figure emerged from the shadows, armed, moving with military precision. Your Grace, Duchess Hale, you need to come with me. Now! Was one of the royal guards. Behind him, 3 more. We've been watching you since the hearing, the guard said. Suspected someone might try something. Get to your inn, pack, and get out of the capital. Tonight. These men won't be the last. Who sent them? Corvin demanded. Does it matter? You won the hearing, but you've made powerful enemies. They're not going to let this go. The guard looked between them. You've stirred up the whole territory. Some people want you to succeed, others want you destroyed. And right now, the ones who want you destroyed have money and patience. What do we do? You go home. You keep your heads down. You make that timber operation work and prove them all wrong. The guard's expression was grim. And you watch your backs because this isn't over. They made it to the inn, packed in minutes, rode out of the capital as the last light faded from the sky. 10 miles out, on a narrow forest road, Corvin finally spoke. That was too organized, too planned. I know. Someone wanted us dead, or at least scared enough to stop fighting. Yes. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Corvin said, We can't go back to Wintermere directly. If they tried once, they'll try again. We need to take the forest routes, avoid main roads. The forest routes take 3 extra days, and they're dangerous, bandits, rough terrain. Main roads are more dangerous right now. We take our chances with bandits. Lysandra wanted to argue, but he was right. They turned onto a smaller path, barely more than a deer trail, leading into the deep woods. Behind them, the capital lights faded. Ahead, only darkness and the sound of their horses' hooves on frozen ground. Somewhere in that darkness, something waited. Lysandra could feel it, the pressure of eyes watching, of danger coiling. They'd won the hearing. Now they had to survive getting home. The forest closed around them like a fist. Trees so dense the moonlight barely penetrated, the path so narrow they had to ride single file. Corvin led, his hand never far from the pistol at his belt. Lysandra followed, every muscle tense, listening for sounds that didn't belong. They'd been riding for maybe 2 hours when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit a tree trunk 3 feet from Corvin's head, spraying bark. His horse reared. Lysandra's bolted sideways, nearly throwing her. Down, Corvin shouted, already dismounting, pulling her from the saddle. They hit the ground hard. More shots. At least 3 shooters, spread across the ridge above them. The horses scattered into the darkness. How many? Lysandra gasped. Too many. Corvin fired back, the muzzle flash lighting his face for an instant. We need to move. Can't stay here. They ran. Crashed through underbrush, branches tearing at clothes and skin. Behind them, shouts. The crunch of boots on frozen leaves. The terrain dropped suddenly, a steep slope covered in loose rocks and dead vegetation. Lysandra slid more than ran, grabbing at trees to slow herself. Corvin was ahead, moving with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. They hit the bottom in a creek bed, ice-cold water soaking through their boots. This way, Corvin hissed, pulling her upstream. Water kills the scent if they have dogs. They have dogs? I'm not taking chances. They waited for what felt like miles, but was probably only minutes. The creek widened, deepened. Lysandra's feet went numb. Her teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue. Finally, Corvin pulled them onto the bank, into a hollow beneath an overhang of rock. Stay quiet, he whispered. Don't move. They pressed into the darkness, Corvin's body shielding hers. Lysandra could feel his heart hammering, his breath coming hard. Or maybe that was her own heartbeat, her own breathing. Hard to tell when fear was flooding every sense. Voices above them, torchlight flickering through the trees. Lost them in the creek. Fan out, they can't have gone far. This is a waste of time. Duke's probably already dead from the cold. We don't get paid unless we bring proof. Keep looking. The voices faded. The torchlight moved away. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. Lysandra's entire body was shaking from cold and adrenaline. We need to keep moving, Corvin finally said. They'll search in a grid. We have maybe an hour before they circle back. I can't feel my feet. Then I'll carry you. Corvin, I'm not leaving you, and we're not stopping. So either you walk or I carry you, but we're moving. Now. She walked. Somehow. Stumbling, leaning on him more than she wanted to admit, but moving. The night stretched into an endless blur of cold and fear and exhaustion. They walked until the forest began to thin, until the first gray light of dawn touched the sky. There, Corvin said, pointing to a shape in the distance. Shepherd's hut. Abandoned, but it'll have walls and maybe a fireplace. It did have walls. Barely. The roof was half collapsed, the door hanging on one hinge. But there was a stone fireplace and enough dry wood stacked inside to suggest someone had used this place recently. Corvin got a fire going while Lysandra collapsed against the wall, too tired to do anything but shake. Take off your boots, he ordered. What? Your boots. And your stockings. You're going to lose your toes to frostbite if we don't warm them up. She fumbled with the laces, fingers too numb to work properly. Corvin took over, unlacing her boots with surprising gentleness, pulling off the soaked stockings. Her feet were white, bloodless. This is going to hurt, he warned. He was right. As circulation returned, the pain was excruciating. Lysandra bit down on her sleeve to keep from crying out. Corvin rubbed her feet between his hands, forcing warmth back into frozen flesh. Stay with me. Talk to me. Don't pass out. About what? Anything. Your mother. The ships. Whatever keeps you conscious. My mother, Lysandra said through gritted teeth, would have had an escape plan. Multiple escape plans. She never went anywhere without knowing exactly how to get out if things went wrong. Smart woman. The smartest. My father always said she could negotiate her way out of any situation, talk her way past any barrier. The pain was lessening slightly, or maybe she was just getting used to it. She died when I was 15. Fever, 3 days from perfectly healthy to gone. I'm sorry. My father never recovered. He tried. Kept the business running, kept up appearances. But he was just going through the motions. All the actual decision-making, that had been her. Without her, he just drifted. Made bad choices, trusted the wrong people. She looked at Corvin. Your father did the same thing, didn't he, after your mother died? Corvin's hand stilled. How did you know? Charlotte mentioned it, and I saw the records. The decline started the year she died. He loved her, really loved her. The kind of love where losing it destroys you. Corvin resumed rubbing her feet. I swore I'd never be that vulnerable. Never need anyone that much. Is that why you married me the way you did? Cold? Transactional? Keep all the feelings locked away? I married you because I had no choice. The feelings were irrelevant. Were they? He didn't answer, just kept working on her feet until the color returned, until she could wiggle her toes without screaming. You need to sleep, he said finally. I'll keep watch. You need sleep too. I'll sleep when we're safe, which isn't now. Lysandra wanted to argue, but exhaustion was crushing, undeniable. She leaned against the wall, pulled her cloak tight, and fell into something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't quite consciousness either. She woke to voices outside. Corvin had his pistol drawn, pressed against the wall by the door. Morning light streamed through the broken roof. Tracks lead this way. You sure? 2 sets. Fresh. Can't be more than a few hours old. Lysandra's heart stopped. They'd been found. Corvin looked at her, gestured for silence. Then he mouthed a single word. Run. The door burst open. Corvin fired. The first man went down. The second dove for cover. Lysandra was already moving, scrambling for the back of the hut, where the wall had partially collapsed. She squeezed through, heard more shots behind her, didn't look back, just ran. The forest swallowed her. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs gave out, until she collapsed behind a fallen tree and tried not to sob. Corvin. Where was Corvin? She waited, listened, heard nothing but wind and her own ragged breathing, then footsteps. Heavy. Multiple people. She pressed deeper into her hiding spot, held her breath. Duchess Hale. A woman's voice. Calm. Familiar. You can come out. You're safe. Lysandra didn't move. Your Grace, it's Charlotte. I'm here with Henrik and 20 men from Millbrook. The shooters are dead or scattered. Please, we need to find Corvin. Charlotte. Lysandra stood on shaking legs, saw Charlotte emerging from the trees, Henrik beside her, both armed, both looking grim. How did you... We received word about the attack in the capital, left immediately, tracked you through the forest. Charlotte's face was tight with fear. Where's my brother? The hut, back there. There were men, shots. Henrik was already running. Charlotte grabbed Lysandra's arm and they followed. They found Corvin on the ground outside the hut, bleeding from a wound in his side. 2 bodies lay nearby, the men who'd burst in. A third was crawling away, leaving a blood trail. Henrik's men secured the area while Charlotte dropped to her knees beside Corvin. You idiot, she said, voice shaking. You absolute idiot. Good to see you too, Corvin managed. His face was gray. The wound was bad. We need to get him to Wintermere, Henrik said. There's a doctor in Millbrook, but Wintermere has a physician, better equipped. Charlotte was already tearing cloth for bandages. How far? 6 hours if we push, but moving him could... Leaving him here will definitely kill him. We move. Now. They made a litter from branches and cloaks, loaded Corvin onto it as gently as possible. He passed out halfway through, which was probably a mercy given the pain. Lysandra walked beside the litter, holding his hand. It was cold. Too cold. He'll be fine, Charlotte said, but her voice lacked conviction. He better be. I didn't fight the entire territorial council just to lose him to bandits in the woods. Those weren't bandits. They were too organized, too determined. I know. Lysandra looked at Charlotte. Someone wants us dead. Someone with money and resources. Pemberton? Or one of the creditors? Or someone else we've offended in the past 3 months? Take your pick. They reached Wintermere as the sun was setting. Mrs. Davins had the physician waiting, an older man named Dr. Carstairs, who took one look at Corvin's wound and immediately started barking orders. Get him inside. I need boiling water, clean linens, and my surgical kit. Now! They carried Corvin to his chambers. Lysandra tried to follow, but Dr. Carstairs blocked the door. Out! Everyone out! I can't work with you hovering. I'm not leaving. You're covered in blood and half frozen yourself. You'll either faint or get in my way. Out! Charlotte pulled her into the hallway. Let him work. Corvin survived worse. Has he? No, but it sounded comforting. They waited in the library. Hours passed. Charlotte paced. Lysandra sat motionless, still feeling Corvin's cold hand in hers. Finally, near midnight, Dr. Carstairs emerged. He'll live. The bullet missed anything vital, but infection is still a risk. He needs to stay in bed for at least a week, probably 2. No riding, no stress, no dramatic heroics. That last one might be challenging, Charlotte muttered. Then make it not challenging. Keep him calm, keep him rested, or I won't be responsible for the consequences. Dr. Carstairs looked at Lysandra. You should rest too, Duchess. You look like you're about to collapse. Can I see him? Briefly, he's heavily sedated. Corvin's room was warm, fire burning in the hearth. He lay in the massive bed, bandaged and pale but breathing steadily. Lysandra sat beside him, took his hand again. Still cold, but not as bad as before. You're not allowed to die, she whispered. We have too much work to do, and I refuse to run this estate alone. His fingers twitched. Maybe a response, maybe just reflex. She stayed until her own exhaustion became impossible to ignore, then stumbled to her own chambers and fell into bed fully clothed. She woke to Charlotte shaking her shoulder. What time is it? Lysandra mumbled. Noon. You slept 14 hours. Charlotte set down a tray with food. Eat. Then we need to talk. About? About the fact that someone just tried to murder both of you, and we have no idea if they'll try again. About the timber operation that's still running and needs management. About the fact that Corvin's going to be useless for weeks, and someone needs to actually run this estate. Charlotte's expression was fierce. About the fact that you just became the de facto Duke of Wintermere, whether you wanted to or not. Lysandra sat up, accepted the food. I'm not the Duke. No, but you're the only person here with both the authority and the knowledge to make decisions. Henrik can't do it. He's not family. I can't do it. I'm 16 and no one will listen to me. Garrett. Charlotte's lip curled. Garrett is worse than useless, which leaves you. The estate will accept orders from whoever keeps them alive and employed. You proved you could do that at the council meeting. Now you need to do it again. Charlotte was right. Lysandra hated that she was right, but she was. Fine. Get Henrik, Mrs. Davins, and anyone else who actually knows how things work. We're having a meeting in 1 hour. The meeting happened in the main dining hall, the one that hadn't been used in 3 years. Lysandra sat at the head of the table because someone had to, and everyone else seemed to expect it. Henrik brought reports on the timber operation. Second shipment is ready. After the disaster with the first buyer, I've been conservative about quality claims. This batch is good, but we're pricing it as mid-grade rather than premium. Smart. Do we have buyers? 3 interested parties, none confirmed yet. Confirm them. Today if possible. We need revenue before the next debt payment is due. On it. Mrs. Davins reported on household expenses. Too high, but she'd already identified areas to cut. The stables manager reported on livestock. Winter feeding would be tight, but manageable. The groundskeeper talked about infrastructure repairs that couldn't wait. Garrett sat silent through all of it, his expression growing progressively darker. If I may, he finally said, voice tight, this is highly irregular. The Duchess has no formal authority to... The Duchess is the only person in this room who successfully defended this estate in Crown Court, Henrik interrupted. Maybe you weren't there, Garrett, but the rest of us heard about it. So unless you have better ideas, I suggest you shut up and let her work. Garrett's face went purple. How dare you? I dare because my crew is depending on this estate for their livelihoods, and I've seen more competence from the Duchess in 2 months than I've seen from you in 3 years. That's enough, Lysandra said quietly. Garrett, I understand this is difficult, but right now Corvin is incapacitated and someone needs to make decisions. I'm not trying to undermine you. I'm trying to keep everything from falling apart. By taking over, by doing what needs to be done. If you want to help, I welcome it. If you want to fight me, I don't have time for it. Choose. Garrett stood, walked out without another word. That went well, Charlotte muttered. He'll either come around or he won't. We can't wait for him. Lysandra turned back to Henrik. The timber buyers, can you reach them today? If I ride hard. Then ride. And Henrik? Take armed men. If someone tried to kill us once, they'll try again. Henrik nodded grimly. Already planned on it. Over the next week, Lysandra fell into a rhythm she never wanted but somehow fitted. Mornings dealing with estate business. Afternoons reviewing finances, drafting contracts, managing the constant stream of crises that came with running a territory this size. Evenings checking on Corvin, who was healing but frustrated at being bedridden. "You're enjoying this," he accused one night. "I'm absolutely not enjoying this. I'm exhausted." "But you're good at it." "That's different from enjoying it." "Is it?" He shifted in bed, winced. "Lysandra, if the roles were reversed, would you give this up? Go back to being the decorative duchess in the corner?" She thought about it, honestly thought about it. "No," she finally said. "I don't think I would." "Then maybe we should make it official, joint authority, real partnership, not just crisis management. The estate won't. The estate already listens to you more than they listen to me. Have you noticed? The tenants? The merchants? Even Henrik. They come to you first now. Not because I'm injured, but because you actually have answers. Corvin, I'm serious. When this is over, when I'm healed and things stabilize, I want you as my partner, real partner, equal authority. We run Wintermere together." Lysandra looked at him. This man who'd married her out of desperation, who'd treated her like a transaction, who'd spent 3 years destroying himself trying to do everything alone. "All right," she said. "Partners." He smiled, real and warm. "Good. Now get out of here and go sleep. You look terrible." "Charming as always. One of my best qualities." The timber sales came through 2 days later. Not premium prices, but solid mid-range. Enough to make the next debt payment and have a small surplus. Lysandra was reviewing the contracts when Charlotte burst in. "We have visitors." "Who?" "Lord Pemberton, Lord Blackwood, 3 other council members. They're in the main hall and they want to speak with whoever's running this estate." Lysandra's stomach dropped. "Did they say what they want?" "No, but they don't look friendly." Lysandra found them in the main hall, arrayed like a tribunal. Pemberton at the center, expression unreadable. "Duchess Hale," he said. "How kind of you to receive us." Lord Pemberton. "To what do I owe this visit?" "We've been hearing interesting reports about the Duke's recovery, about you taking over estate management, about timber sales and debt payments made on time despite considerable obstacles." He paused. "We wanted to see for ourselves if the reports were accurate." "They are. Remarkable, especially given that someone apparently tried to murder both you and your husband on the road from the capital." "That's also accurate." "Any idea who?" "Several ideas. No proof?" Pemberton smiled thinly. "I suppose we'll leave that to the Crown investigators. In the meantime, we've come to deliver something." He gestured. Lord Blackwood stepped forward, handed Lysandra a document. She opened it, read. Had to read it twice because it didn't make sense. "This is a debt forgiveness agreement." "Yes, from all 5 of us. A total of approximately 12,000 crowns removed from your obligations." Pemberton's expression was still unreadable. "Consider it an investment in Wintermere's future." "Why?" "Because you earned it. At the council meeting, we gave you 6 months to prove yourselves. Then we moved the timeline up to sabotage you, and you still delivered. Then someone tried to kill you, and you still came back and kept the operation running." Pemberton's smile shifted into something that might have been respect. "That's the kind of determination this territory needs. And frankly, Duchess, I'd rather work with you than against you. We're not allies." "No. But we're not enemies either. Not anymore." He gestured to the document. "Accept the forgiveness. Use the breathing room to keep stabilizing the estate, and prove that we were right to bet on you instead of destroying you." After they left, Lysandra stood in the empty hall staring at the document. 12,000 crowns. Just forgiven. She went to Corvin's room, found him sitting up for the first time in days. "You're not going to believe what just happened," she said. He listened to her explanation, read the document, and laughed. "We actually did it. We actually turned them. Not all of them, just enough. That's all we needed." He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You did this. You know that, right? Everything that's happened, every victory we've had, it started with you refusing to disappear. We did this, together. Yes, but I would have given up a dozen times without you, would have surrendered to Pemberton, to the petition, to the ambush in the woods. You kept fighting when I couldn't. Because someone had to. No, because you chose to. That's different." He held out his hand. "Come here." She took his hand. He pulled her down to sit on the edge of the bed. Lysandra, I know this marriage started wrong, transactional, cold, everything you never wanted, but somewhere in the past 3 months, it became something else, at least for me. And I need to know if she kissed him. Not calculated, not strategic. Just a kiss because she wanted to, because she was tired of pretending this was still just business. When they broke apart, Corvin was staring at her. That was unexpected, he said. Was it? Given that you've spent 3 months being professional and distant? Yes. I stopped being distant the moment I broke into your study. You just didn't notice. I noticed. I was just too terrified to believe it meant anything. Terrified of what? Of hoping. Of wanting something I didn't think I could have. His hand cupped her face. I'm not good at this. The feelings, the vulnerability, any of it. My father destroyed himself loving someone that much, and I swore I'd never... I'm not your mother, and you're not your father. What we have is ours, not some repetition of their story. What do we have? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing calculated about it from either of them. They broke apart when Charlotte cleared her throat from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt what is clearly a moment, she said, grinning. But Henrik just rode in with news about the third timber shipment, and it's good. How good? Lysandra asked. Sold for full asking price. Premium buyer, willing to commit to 3 more shipments next season. We're not just stable anymore, we're actually profitable. Corvin started laughing. Real, genuine laughter. We did it. We actually did it. Don't get too excited. You're still on bed rest for another week. But Lysandra was smiling too. Charlotte, call everyone together. The whole household. I want to announce this properly. An hour later, the main hall was packed. Estate workers, tenants who'd ridden in from the surrounding holdings, merchants from Millbrook. Everyone who'd been part of keeping Wintermere alive. Lysandra stood at the front, Corvin beside her. Against doctor's orders, but upright and steady. 3 months ago, she said, her voice carrying through the hall, this estate was failing. We were drowning in debt, isolated, with no path forward. And most of you had every reason to believe that was the end. She looked at the faces watching her, saw recognition, saw hope. But we didn't end. We fought. Every single person in this room contributed something. Labor, expertise, faith that we could turn this around. The timber operation succeeded because Henrik knew how to harvest sustainably. The reorganization worked because the tenants trusted us enough to try a new model. We survived the petition because we stood together. She held up the debt forgiveness document. Today, we received formal acknowledgement of that effort. 12,000 crowns in debt, forgiven. Not because we begged, but because we proved we were worth investing in. And the third timber shipment sold for premium prices, with commitments for next season. The hall erupted in cheers. This doesn't mean we're done, Lysandra continued once they'd quieted. We still have debts to pay, still have repairs to make, still have a territory to rebuild. But we're doing it from a position of strength now, not desperation, and that's because of all of you. More cheers. Lysandra stepped back, let Corvin take over. My wife is too modest, he said. None of this happens without her. She saw what I couldn't, that survival isn't about fighting alone. It's about trusting the people around you to help carry the weight. I failed at that for 3 years. She fixed it in 3 months. He looked at Lysandra. So I'm making this official. The Duchess of Wintermere has full joint authority over all estate matters. Any decisions she makes carry the same weight as mine. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The hall went quiet. Then Henrik started clapping. Others joined. Soon the entire room was applauding, and Lysandra felt something warm and unexpected flood through her. Acceptance, recognition, belonging. After the gathering dispersed, Corvin pulled her aside. You realize what you've done, right? You've completely transformed this place. The estate, the people, everything. We transformed it. No, you did. I just tried to keep up. He leaned against the wall, wincing slightly. And I'm grateful for all of it. For you refusing to disappear, for fighting when I couldn't, for seeing something worth saving in this disaster. There was always something worth saving. You just couldn't see it. I can see it now. They stood together in the quiet hall, and for the first time since their wedding, the silence between them wasn't hostile or uncomfortable. It was something else. Something that felt like home. Winter came to Wintermere with teeth bared. Snow buried the roads, locked the forest paths, turned the estate grounds into a white wasteland. But inside the main house, fires burned in every hearth, the kitchen stayed warm, and for the first time in 3 years, the household felt alive. Corvin healed slowly, too slowly for his liking, but Dr. Carstairs was merciless about enforcing bed rest. Lysandra took over completely, and to her surprise, the estate didn't collapse. If anything, it ran smoother. The tenants brought issues directly to her now. Henrik coordinated the winter preparations for next season's timber harvest. Charlotte managed the household accounts with frightening efficiency. Even Mrs. Davins seemed more animated, actually smiling occasionally. Garrett remained conspicuously absent. He'd moved into one of the estate's outer buildings, still nominally the steward, but functionally irrelevant. "He'll either accept the new order or leave," Charlotte said one evening as they reviewed supply inventories. "Either way, we're better off." He was loyal to Corvin for years. He was loyal to the idea of Corvin as a helpless duke he could manipulate. Now that Corvin has you, Garrett's irrelevant. That's what he can't stomach. Lysandra suspected Charlotte was right, but she had bigger concerns. The Crown investigators had arrived 3 weeks after the attack, asking questions about the ambush, about the men who'd died, about who might have ordered it. They'd interviewed everyone, examined bodies, collected evidence. Then they'd left without making any arrests or drawing any conclusions. Which means either they don't know who did it, or they know and can't prove it, Corvin said when Lysandra told him. He was finally allowed to sit up, to move around his room, though Dr. Carstairs still forbade anything strenuous. Or they know and someone powerful is protecting the perpetrators. Also possible. Corvin's expression darkened. "We need to assume they'll try again. Whoever wanted us dead isn't going to stop just because the first attempt failed. Then we make ourselves harder to kill. More guards. Better security. No traveling without armed escort. That's not a life, Lysandra. That's a prison. It's survival. We can worry about comfort after we've survived." He didn't argue. Couldn't argue. Because she was right. The real test came in early spring, when the roads cleared and travel became possible again. Lord Pemberton sent word requesting a meeting. Not a summons, not a demand, a request. At Wintermere, not the capital. "It's a trap," Charlotte said immediately. "Maybe. Or maybe he actually wants to negotiate." Lysandra looked at Corvin. "What do you think?" "I think we don't have much choice. If Pemberton wants us dead, he doesn't need to come here personally to arrange it. And if he wants to talk, we need to listen." Pemberton arrived on a cold morning with minimal escort, just 2 guards and his personal secretary. He looked older than Lysandra remembered, the winter having carved deeper lines into his face. They received him in the main hall, Lysandra and Corvin seated together at the head table. A deliberate choice, joint authority, visible and undeniable. "Your Grace, Duchess Hale." Pemberton inclined his head. "Thank you for receiving me." "You came a long way," Corvin said. "I assume it's important." "It is. I'll be direct. I've spent the winter investigating the attack on you, quietly, using resources the Crown investigators don't have access to." Lysandra's pulse quickened. And I found the man who ordered it, Lord Marcus Ravencroft, one of your father's creditors, Duchess. Apparently he had significant holdings in trade routes that competed with the Vale merchant fleet. When your mother died and the fleet started declining, Ravencroft bought up the contracts cheap. Then when you married Duke Hale and started reorganizing, you threatened to rebuild those routes. He stood to lose millions. So he tried to kill us? He hired men to kill you. The Crown can't prove it. Ravencroft's too careful, too well connected. But I can prove it. I have testimony, documentation enough to destroy him socially, if not legally. Corvin leaned forward. What do you want? I want to end this war. The one between us, between the old guard and the new, between people who think the Northern Territories should stay locked in the past, and those of us who see potential for something better. Pemberton pulled out a document. This is a formal alliance proposal, 5 major houses, including mine. We're offering joint investment in Wintermere's recovery, capital, resources, trade connections, in exchange for partnership in the timber operation and future development projects. Lysandra took the document, read it carefully. The terms were generous, surprisingly so. Why? She asked. Because you've done in 6 months what the rest of us couldn't do in years. You've turned a failing estate into a viable operation. You've reorganized tenant relationships in a way that actually benefits everyone. You've demonstrated that collaboration works better than exploitation. Pemberton's expression was unreadable. I'm old, Duchess. I've spent 40 years playing power games, crushing competitors, protecting my position. And I'm tired. Tired of fighting over scraps when we could be building something real. What about Ravencroft? I'm handling Ravencroft. By the time I'm done, he'll be socially destroyed, financially ruined, and lucky if the Crown doesn't decide to prosecute after all. But I need your cooperation. I need you to testify about the attack, to provide documentation of his financial motives. Can you do that? Lysandra looked at Corvin. He nodded slightly. We can, she said, but we have conditions. Name them. Full transparency on all joint ventures. No hidden clauses, no exploitation of tenants or workers. If we're partners, we're equal partners. And any house that joins this alliance agrees to the same terms. Agreed. What else? Charlotte Hale gets a formal role in estate management, not as a courtesy, but with actual authority and compensation. She's 16, brilliant, and has earned it. Pemberton smiled. The girl who coordinated your entire household operation while you were in the capital? I'd be insulted if she wasn't included. Anything else? Garrett Voss gets a generous retirement package. He's been loyal to the Hale family for decades. He deserves to leave with dignity, even if his role here is finished. Compassionate. I approve. Pemberton stood. Then we have an agreement. I'll draft the formal contracts and return next week for signatures. In the meantime, I suggest you increase your security. Ravencroft may be finished, but cornered men are dangerous. After he left, Charlotte appeared from wherever she'd been listening. Did that just happen? Did Pemberton actually offer us an alliance? He did, Lysandra said. And you believed him. I believed he's tired of fighting and that we've proven ourselves valuable enough to be worth investing in. She looked at Corvin. What do you think? I think we'd be fools to refuse, and I think you just negotiated better terms than I ever could have. We negotiated together. That's how this works now. He smiled, real and warm. Yes, it is. The formal alliance was signed 3 weeks later in a ceremony that brought all 5 houses to Wintermere. The estate that had been empty and lifeless 6 months ago now overflowed with people, with energy, with something that felt like hope. The contracts were elaborate but fair. Joint investment in infrastructure, new roads, improved irrigation, modern equipment, coordinated timber harvesting across multiple estates, shared trade routes and merchant connections. Everything designed to benefit the entire territory, not just individual holdings. This is how my father should have done it, Corvin said quietly as they watched the signing. Building alliances through mutual benefit instead of social posturing. Your father did the best he could with what he knew. You're doing better because you learned from his mistakes. We're doing better. Stop letting me take credit for your work. Stop being modest. It's unsettling. He laughed, and Lysandra realized how much she loved that sound, how much she'd come to love everything about this complicated, damaged, brilliant man. The celebration lasted late into the night. Music, food, people actually enjoying themselves in the halls that had been silent for so long. Lysandra found Charlotte on one of the balconies, staring out at the estate grounds. Congratulations on your new position, Lysandra said. Thank you for demanding it. I wasn't sure anyone would actually listen. They listened because you earned it, just like I earned mine. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd refused? If you just stayed in your rooms and let everything fall apart? Sometimes. But I couldn't. Your brother was drowning, and She trailed off. You loved him, even when you didn't want to. Is it that obvious? Only to anyone paying attention. Charlotte smiled. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, glad you fought, glad you refused to disappear. So am I. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration below. The attack came 2 weeks later. Not on the estate. Ravencroft was smarter than that. He went after the timber shipment, the one carrying the first harvest from the new joint operation. Pirates. Hired mercenaries, actually, but they wore pirate colors to obscure their origins. They hit the Vale ship carrying the timber as it rounded the Sorrow coast, The same waters where the North Star had gone down. But this time Lysandra had prepared. She'd hired additional guards, armed the crew, and coordinated with the naval patrol that protected major shipping routes. The pirates attacked. The crew fought back. The naval patrol arrived within hours. Drawn by signal fires, the captain had been instructed to light at the first sign of trouble. 3 pirates died. 5 were captured. The rest scattered. And in their possession, investigators found documents, orders, payment records. All of it traceable directly back to Lord Marcus Ravencroft. The Crown moved fast. Ravencroft was arrested within days, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. The trial was swift and brutal. He was convicted of attempted murder, conspiracy, and about a dozen other charges that carried sentences measured in decades. Lysandra attended the sentencing, wanted to see it with her own eyes. Ravencroft looked at her across the courtroom, and his expression was pure hatred. "You destroyed me," he said. "No," Lysandra replied. "You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to let you destroy me in the process." The judge sentenced him to 30 years. He'd die in prison. Lysandra felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet sense of closure. It was over. Spring turned to summer. The estate transformed. New roads connected previously isolated holdings. The irrigation system was rebuilt, expanding arable land by nearly 20%. The timber operations scaled up, now coordinated across 3 estates with shared equipment and expertise. Revenue didn't just stabilize, it grew. Debts got paid down faster than projected. The quarterly audits showed consistent improvement, enough that the Crown reduced oversight requirements. Wintermere was thriving. Lysandra stood in what had been the dead garden behind the main house, now being rebuilt by a team of workers Charlotte had assembled. Flowers were starting to bloom, early varieties that could handle the harsh northern climate. "You're not supposed to be doing manual labor," Corvin said, finding her with dirt on her hands and a shovel beside her. "I planted 1 rose bush, hardly labor." Dr. Carstairs said, "Doctor, Carstairs needs to worry about actual medical emergencies, not me planting flowers." She smiled. "Besides, I wanted to do it myself." "This garden was your mother's, wasn't it?" "How did you know?" "Charlotte mentioned it, said it died the year she did, and your father never had the heart to rebuild it." Corvin walked to the half-planted rose bush, studied it. She loved this garden, spent hours here. It was the one place she was just herself, not the Duchess performing her role. Then we'll make it beautiful again. Not the same as it was. We can't recreate that. But something new. Something that honors what she built while being its own thing. Like this estate. Like all of us. He pulled her close, kissed her temple. "I don't tell you enough how grateful I am. How much you've changed everything. You've changed too. Because of you. Because you chose to. I just gave you a reason." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by the sounds of construction and renewal, and Lysandra thought about how far they'd come. From a marriage of necessity to something real. From a failing estate to a thriving territory. From isolation to partnership. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still debts to pay, still challenges ahead, still repairs that would take years. But they had time now, and they had each other. That evening, they hosted a small dinner. Just family. Charlotte, Henrik, Mrs. Davins, a few others who'd been essential to the recovery. "I have news," Charlotte announced over dessert. "The Merchant Academy in the capital has accepted my application. I start in the fall." Corvin nearly choked on his wine. "The Merchant Academy? Charlotte, you're 16, brilliant, and wasted sitting here managing household accounts when I could be learning actual trade negotiation and international commerce." Lysandra wrote me a recommendation. Apparently, the Academy was very impressed. Corvin looked at Lysandra. "You knew about this?" "Charlotte came to me months ago. I thought it was a brilliant idea. She's 16. I was running trade routes with my mother at 14, Lysandra countered. "Charlotte's ready, and she deserves the opportunity." Corvin opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Looked at his sister. "You really want this?" "More than anything. I love Wintermere, but I want to see the world. Learn things. Become someone on my own terms, not just the Duke's sister." "Then you should go." He raised his glass. "To Charlotte." the smartest person at this table, and the bravest. I'm not braver than Lysandra, Charlotte protested. Different kinds of brave, Lysandra said. You're choosing your own path. That takes courage I didn't have at your age. They drank to Charlotte, and to the future, and to everything they'd built together. Later, alone in their chambers, they'd moved into shared rooms 2 months ago, a quiet shift that no one commented on, but everyone noticed. Corvin pulled Lysandra into his arms. I've been thinking, he said, dangerous. About the future, about what we want it to look like. And I think we should make this official. Not just the joint authority, not just the partnership, everything. Lysandra pulled back to look at him. Corvin, we're already married. We had a ceremony, signed documents, but we never chose each other. Not really. It was necessity and survival. He took her hands. I want to choose you, publicly, intentionally. I want to stand in front of everyone and say that you're not just my duchess. You're my partner, my equal, the person I choose every day. You want to renew our vows? I want to actually make vows, real ones. That means something. His voice was rough with emotion. I love you, Lysandra. I don't know when it happened. Maybe the night you broke into my study, maybe at the council meeting, maybe in the forest when I thought we were going to die. But it happened, and I need you to know. I need everyone to know. Lysandra felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. Have for months. I was just waiting for you to catch up. He laughed, pulled her close, kissed her properly. Then let's do this right. A real wedding, here at Wintermere, with everyone who matters. Not a transaction, a celebration. All right, but I'm not wearing that awful cream dress again. Wear whatever you want. Show up in work clothes covered in dirt. I don't care. Just show up. The ceremony happened on the first day of autumn, in the garden that was still being rebuilt. Flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds. The fountain was repaired and running. The whole estate turned out, along with representatives from all 5 alliance houses. Lysandra wore deep blue silk, practical enough to move in but elegant enough for the occasion. Corvin wore formal attire but left off half the unnecessary decorations, making him look comfortable instead of stiff. They stood together in the garden, hands joined, and spoke vows they'd written themselves. I promise to fight beside you, not for you, Lysandra said. To challenge you when you're wrong, support you when you're right, and stand with you regardless. To build something real with you, not perfect, but ours. I promise to trust you, to listen to you, to never forget that we're stronger together than apart, Corvin said. To love you not despite your strength, but because of it. To be worthy of the partnership you've given me. The priest pronounced them married, again. And this time, the kiss was real. Deep and passionate and utterly unconcerned with propriety. The celebration lasted well into the night. Music and dancing, food and wine, people genuinely happy in a way Wintermere hadn't seen in a generation. Henrik got drunk and gave a rambling speech about timber quality that somehow turned into a tribute to Lysandra's negotiation skills. Charlotte cried, which she claimed was from happiness, but everyone suspected was also about leaving for the academy in a week. Even Garrett appeared, sober and quiet, to offer congratulations and a formal letter of retirement. You were right, he told Lysandra. About everything. The estate needed someone willing to change, to take risks, to actually care about the people and not just the profits. I couldn't be that person. I'm glad you could. You served this family faithfully for decades, Garrett. That matters. Maybe. But it's your family now, yours and the Duke's. Build it into something better than what came before. We will. As the celebration wound down, Lysandra found herself on the same balcony where she'd stood with Charlotte months ago. The estate spread below her, lights glowing in windows, people moving through the grounds. Home. This was home now. Corvin joined her, slipped an arm around her waist. Happy? He asked. Exhausted. But yes, happy. We did it. Actually did it. Saved the estate, built alliances, survived assassination attempts, and fell in love. That's a productive year. When you put it that way, it sounds almost easy. It was anything but. He turned her to face him. Thank you for everything. For not giving up on me, on this place, on any of it. Thank you for letting me fight, for seeing me as a partner instead of a transaction. I don't know how I ever saw you as anything else. They kissed again, and Lysandra thought about the woman she'd been on that rain-soaked wedding day 9 months ago. Trapped, angry, certain her life was over. She'd been wrong. Her life hadn't ended. It had transformed into something she never could have predicted, harder than anything she'd imagined, but also richer, full of purpose and partnership and actual joy. The estate still had challenges. The debts would take years to fully clear. The alliances needed constant maintenance. The territory required endless work to keep improving. But they had time, they had resources, and they had each other. 5 years later, Lysandra stood in the same garden, now fully restored and expanded. Roses bloomed in carefully maintained beds. The fountain splashed merrily, and a small child, 3 years old, dark-haired and gray-eyed, chased butterflies through the flowers while Charlotte watched, home from the Merchant Academy for summer break. "Careful, Thomas," Charlotte called. "Don't trample your mother's roses." "Let him play," Lysandra said, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Second child, due in 2 months. "The roses can handle it." Corvin emerged from the house, papers in hand. The quarterly audit results came back. "We're officially debt-free as of this month." Lysandra turned to stare at him. "Completely?" "Completely. Every creditor paid in full, 2 years ahead of schedule." He set down the papers, pulled her into his arms, carefully, mindful of the pregnancy. "We did it, Lysandra. Actually cleared everything our fathers left us." "We did it," she agreed. "Together!" Thomas crashed into their legs, demanding attention. Corvin scooped him up, tossed him gently, making the boy shriek with laughter. Charlotte joined them, and for a moment they stood together in the garden, the family they'd built, the estate they'd saved, the future they'd created. It wasn't perfect. Corvin still worked too hard sometimes. Lysandra still had to fight for recognition in council meetings, though less often now. The estate still required constant attention. Thomas was entering the phase where everything was a potential disaster, but it was theirs. Real and messy, and absolutely worth every struggle it had taken to get here. "What are you thinking?" Corvin asked quietly. Lysandra looked at her family, at the garden, at the estate stretching into the distance. "I'm thinking about that woman who stood at the cathedral 9 years ago, convinced her life was over. I wish I could tell her it was just beginning." "Would she have believed you?" "Probably not. She was stubborn. Still is. That's what saved us." He kissed her temple. "That's what saved all of us." They stood together in the garden as the sun set over Wintermere, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The estate that had been dying was thriving now. The marriage that had been a transaction was a partnership. The future that had looked impossible was unfolding exactly as it should. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, and hard-won, and absolutely worth fighting for. Lysandra had stopped being invisible, had stopped disappearing into the background, accepting what others decided for her, letting fear and propriety dictate her choices. She'd fought, had gambled everything on a vision of what could be instead of accepting what was. And she'd won. Not alone. Never alone. But with the partner she'd never expected to find, the family she'd helped build, and the territory she'd helped save. The woman who'd been sold into a marriage of necessity had transformed herself into the Duchess of Wintermere, not through title or ceremony, but through stubborn refusal to give up, strategic brilliance, and the absolute conviction that she deserved better than what others had planned for her. And in transforming herself, she'd transformed everything else. Thomas pulled at her skirt, demanding to be picked up. She bent, carefully, and lifted him, feeling his small arms wrap around her neck. "Love you, Mama?" he said. "Love you too, little one." Corvin's arm around her shoulders, Charlotte's laugh as she chased more butterflies. The estate alive and thriving around them. This was what she'd fought for. This moment, this family, this future. And it was more than worth it. It was everything.